In the quiet dawn of the 12th century, when the sun rose over a fractured Holy Land and the echo of the First Crusade still lingered in the dust, a small brotherhood of 9 knights began a journey that would reshape medieval Europe. They were not kings, nor priests, nor scholars, just warriors who believed that God had placed a duty upon them. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. In time, the world would shorten that name into something cleaner, sharper, and far more enduring, the Knights Templar. They began humbly, with no wealth to speak of, and no fortresses under their command. Their first quarters were modest rooms built along the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, an echo of the ancient Temple of Solomon. Yet even in these early years, one could sense an unusual clarity in their purpose. They vowed poverty, but sought no ordinary poverty. They vowed obedience, but their obedience was not to a king. They vowed chastity, but their chastity was bound to a battlefield, not a monastery. They were monks, but they fought. They were warriors, but they prayed. And in this balance between spirit and sword lay the seed of their rise. Pilgrims moved endlessly across the Holy Land in these years. Merchants, widows, nobles, children, all searching for absolution or adventure, but the roads were dangerous, haunted by raiders and lawless clans. The Templars offered something simple yet revolutionary: protection. This service, born from their vow, began to spread through rumour first, then admiration, and finally trust. Trust in the Middle Ages was worth more than gold. With trust came donations, land in France, vineyards in Spain, mills in England. Then came horses, armories, entire villages. One by one, gifts flowed in, until the Templars, who once called themselves poor, discovered that poverty was slipping quietly away. But it was not wealth that made them powerful. It was organisation. They created a structure so disciplined that it resembled an early form of multinational banking. Pilgrims who feared being robbed on the road could deposit money at a Templar house in Paris and withdraw the equivalent in Acre or Tyre. Kings borrowed from them. Merchants relied on them. Even the Pope granted them privileges beyond those of any order, exemption from local taxes, freedom to cross borders without interference, and a legal identity answerable only to the Holy See. In a Europe divided by feudal loyalties, the Templars were a rare body that stood above all earthly powers. And yet, with every rise comes the quiet shadow of its fall. The Holy Land began to slip from Christian hands in the late 12th century. One by one, the Crusader cities fell. Jerusalem was lost. Acre became the last fragile foothold, and in 1291 even it succumbed. The brothers, who once rode out beneath the blazing sun of Palestine, now found themselves retreating onto the shores of Cyprus, their purpose shattered, their enemy triumphant. An order created for the defence of pilgrims no longer had pilgrims to defend. Still, they remained immensely wealthy, which meant they remained deeply envied. Enter King Philip of France, a monarch whose ambitions outstripped his treasury. He owed the Templars considerable debt, and debt in those years could be dissolved in only 2 ways: repayment or destruction. Philip chose the latter. With whispers of heresy already circulating among his advisers, he seized the opportunity. On an October morning in 1307, across all of France, Templar knights were arrested simultaneously. The charges were dramatic: devil worship, spitting on the cross, secret rituals, and almost certainly fabricated. The interrogations were brutal. Many confessed under torture. Many later recanted. Yet the machinery of power had already begun to turn. The Pope, pressured by the French crown, dissolved the order in 1312, not through proof of wrongdoing, but through political necessity. The Templars' properties were transferred to the Hospitallers, though much was quietly absorbed by the French state. Their fleet vanished, their archives disappeared, and their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake on an island in the Seine. As the flames rose, he proclaimed his innocence and called his accusers to stand before God within a year. Legend says his curse was fulfilled. Thus the Templars, a brotherhood once celebrated as the shield of Christendom, disappeared. But like all legends that vanish too suddenly, they never truly faded. In the centuries that followed, whispers grew. People began asking, could an order so wealthy simply evaporate? Were their treasures truly confiscated or hidden away? Had their fleet escaped to Scotland? Were their rituals preserved in secret societies? The absence of answers created a vacuum, and into that vacuum poured imagination, stories of buried gold, lost relics, and secret bloodlines. Yet perhaps the true legacy of the Templars is quieter than the myths. It lies in the way they reshaped medieval finance, in their disciplined codes of conduct, in their stark white mantles marked by the Red Cross, and in the idea that faith and warfare could coexist within a single identity. Even after their destruction, their symbol resurfaces in art, literature, and even modern organisations seeking inspiration in their austere blend of courage and devotion. Today, if one stands in the ruins of their old fortresses, those stone walls softened by centuries of wind, it is easy to imagine the sound of hooves on gravel, the prayer murmured before battle, the distant sea reflecting their white sails. Their story is not only one of rise and ruin, but of memory, the memory of an age when ideals and ambition walked side by side, and when a small brotherhood of 9 men could change the course of history simply by believing that they were chosen. In their rise, we see what conviction can build. In their destruction, we see what fear can destroy. And in their legend, we see the enduring human desire to find meaning in the shadows left behind. Close your eyes now. Let the heavy curtain of the modern world fall away, leaving only the sensation of warm, dry air and the scent of ancient limestone baking in the sun. We are drifting back to the year 1119, to a Jerusalem that feels less like a city and more like a wound trying to heal, the narrow streets echoing with a dozen languages, and the bells of new churches ringing out over old mosques. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. The First Crusade has ended 20 years prior, and while the Christians hold the city, their grip is as fragile as spun glass. The primary danger is not within the walls, but on the winding, desolate road from the port of Jaffa to the holy city. It is a path of limestone and dust, twisting through ravines where bandits wait in the shade of olive groves, watching for the weary. The pilgrim Wolf, travelling these very roads just a few years earlier, wrote of seeing corpses left to rot, because there was no one with the time or safety to bury them. It is into this vacuum of safety that a French nobleman named Hugues de Payens steps forward. He is not a young, hot-blooded knight seeking glory in a tournament. He is a veteran, likely in his late 40s, a man who has seen enough of war to know that true service is often boring, dusty, and thankless. He gathers 8 relatives and acquaintances, men like Godfrey de Saint-Omer, and they approach King Baldwin II of Jerusalem with a proposition that seems almost absurdly humble. They do not ask for titles, they do not ask for gold, they ask only for the authority to police the roads, to act as a permanent escort for the unarmed pilgrims flocking to the holy sites. The king, likely relieved to have competent soldiers solving a problem his overstretched army cannot touch, grants them something far more valuable than coin, a headquarters. And what a headquarters it is. He gives them the Al-Aqsa Mosque, situated on the southern edge of the Temple Mount. To the Crusaders, this is the site of the Temple of Solomon. It is a place heavy with the spiritual gravity of 3 faiths, a platform of stone that seems to float above the city. Here, in the hollowed-out subterranean vaults that they convert into stables, stables that can hold, according to whispers, 1,000 horses. The 9 knights set up their austere life. They have no uniform yet, only the clothes on their backs. Legend tells us they were so poor that Hugh and Godfrey had to share a single horse, a detail immortalised on their seal, a potent image of brotherhood, though one suspects it was also the medieval equivalent of a very uncomfortable carpool. For the first 9 years, they are strangely quiet. They do not recruit. They do not fight in major campaigns. They simply exist on the mount, patrolling, and some say digging. Historians still argue whether their initial silence was due to a lack of resources or a secret mission to excavate the ruins beneath their feet, searching for something lost, perhaps the Ark of the Covenant, or perhaps just a quiet place to pray away from the heat. But whether they found holy relics or just centuries of dust, they found something else in those stone halls, a resolve that would soon shake the world. The wind shifts now, carrying us away from the sun-baked stones of the Temple Mount, lifting us over the glittering Mediterranean and dropping us gently into the deep, verdant forests of Champagne, France. It is the year 1129, and the air here is different, crisp, damp, and smelling of pine needles and damp earth rather than dust and spice. 10 years have passed since the brotherhood formed in the shadows of Solomon's temple, and for those 10 years they have been a quiet anomaly, a strange experiment existing on the fringe of acceptance. But Hugh de Payan, the Grand Master, knows that silence does not build empires, nor does it pay for the grain and horses needed to patrol the road to Jericho. He realizes that for his order to survive, it requires more than the permission of a king in Jerusalem. It needs the blessing of the church in Rome. And so, he travels west, embarking on a recruitment tour that is part diplomatic mission, part fundraising gala, and part spiritual crusade. He arrives in Europe not as a beggar, but as a curiosity. The nobility of France and England are fascinated by these men who claim to be both monks and knights, a concept that, to the medieval mind, is as contradictory as fire made of water. Monks are supposed to pray in cloisters, their hands soft from turning pages, while knights are supposed to ride, hunt, and fight, their hands calloused from the hilt of a sword. To combine the two is to challenge the very structure of society. To bridge this gap, Hugh needs a champion, a voice so thunderous and respected that no bishop would dare contradict it. He finds this voice in Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard is a Cistercian abbot, a man of terrifying intellect and burning piety, whose words carry the weight of Scripture. He is also, conveniently, the nephew of one of the original 9 Templars, André de Montbard. Nepotism, it seems, is a historical tradition as old as time itself. Bernard takes up his pen and writes a treatise titled De Laude Novae Militia, in praise of the new knighthood. In it, he paints the Templars not as mere soldiers, but as the champions of a higher spiritual war. He argues that while a secular knight kills out of vanity or greed, a Templar kills only evil. It is a brilliant piece of theological gymnastics that clears the path for the Council of Troyes. Picture the scene in January 1129, a great cathedral hall in the city of Troy, the stone floor cold enough to seep through the thickest leather soles. A gathering of archbishops, abbots, and papal legates sits in judgment, their breath misting in the winter air. Before them stands Hugh de Payan, likely worn from travel, explaining the humble origins of his order. The scribes scratch furiously on parchment, recording the decisions that will bind these men for centuries. This is the moment the Latin rule is drafted, 72 clauses that will define every waking moment of a Templar's life. It is a document of rigorous discipline, modelled on the Cistercian way of life, but adapted for the camp and the saddle. They are to speak little, and never with laughter that is idle or foolish, a rule that suggests the medieval church had a deep suspicion of a good joke. They are forbidden to play chess or dice, for games of chance distract the mind from God. They are told exactly how much meat they can eat, 3 times a week, to keep them strong for battle, and how they must sleep, in a shirt and breeches with a lamp burning all night, so they are always ready for action. But the most striking decision made at Troyes is not about food or games, it is about identity. The council decrees that the knights shall wear a habit of pure white. White, the colour of spiritual purity, the colour of the washed soul. Imagine the visual impact of this in a muddy, drab world where dyes are expensive and armour is a dull grey. To see a knight clad entirely in white, riding a warhorse, would have been startling, like seeing a ghost manifested in iron and wool. It is important to note that the famous red cross, the croix pâté, that we see in every movie and video game, was not granted at Troy. Sure, that splash of crimson would not be added until nearly 20 years later. Authorised by Pope Eugenius III as a symbol of martyrdom, a reminder that they must be willing to shed their blood as Christ did. For now, they are simply the White Knights. With the papal seal of approval secured, the transformation is instantaneous and overwhelming. The poor fellow soldiers are poor no longer. Europe opens its coffers. A noble in Provence donates a farm. A count in Portugal donates a border castle. A widow in London leaves her estate. Younger sons of the nobility, who have no inheritance and no desire to join a traditional monastery where the most exciting event of the day is gardening, flock to the Templar banner. Here is a life that offers the salvation of a monk with the adrenaline of a warrior. It is the perfect vocation for the pious man who is also quite good at hitting things. We see them now, not as 9 men sharing a horse, but as a growing legion. We see the construction of preceptories, Templar bases, springing up across the French countryside. These are not just barracks. They are working farms, administrative centres, and recruitment hubs. The atmosphere within these walls is one of hushed efficiency. There is the smell of rising dough from the ovens, the clang of the smithy repairing horseshoes, and the low murmur of Latin prayers. But there is no idle chatter, no women, no hawks or hunting dogs. It is a machine built for one purpose: to funnel resources from the quiet fields of Europe to the burning frontiers of the East. Historians still debate just how rapid this expansion really was. Some argue that the records exaggerate the suddenness of their wealth, suggesting a slower, more gradual accumulation of assets that only looked like an explosion in hindsight. Others point to the sheer volume of land charters dated to the 1130s as proof that the Templars went viral in the truest sense of the word. Regardless of the speed, the result is undeniable. When Hugues de Payan returns to Jerusalem, he does not travel alone. He brings with him a small army of new recruits, fresh-faced and eager, wearing their pristine white mantles that have not yet been stained by the dust of the Levant. They ride not as a ragtag police force, but as an elite shock troop of the Church, exempt from the laws of kings, answerable only to the Pope. The transformation is complete. The seed planted in the Al-Aqsa Mosque has bloomed into a mighty oak, its roots drinking deep from the soil of Europe, its branches casting a long shadow over the Holy Land. But as they ride back toward the rising sun, they carry with them the heavy weight of expectation. They are no longer just protecting pilgrims, they are carrying the honour of Christendom on their saddles. The white mantle is a heavy garment, for on white, every speck of dirt, every drop of blood, and every mistake is visible for all the world to see. The narrative lens now widens, pulling back from the grand councils and the hushed cloisters to the dusty, sun-bleached reality of the road. It is here, on the winding tracks between Jaffa and Jerusalem, that the Templar legend truly begins to breathe. We are in the mid-12th century, and the protection of pilgrims is no longer just a vague mission statement. It is a daily, gritty operation involving logistics, intelligence, and sudden, violent skirmishes. To understand the value of the Templars, one must first understand the terror of the journey. A pilgrim in the 1100s is not a tourist. They are often sick, elderly, or desperate, carrying their life savings sewn into the lining of their cloaks. They walk through a landscape that is alien and hostile, a terrain of jagged limestone gorges where the heat hammers down like a physical weight, and water is a precious, hidden commodity. For the local Bedouin raiders, or the remnants of Fatimid armies hiding in the hills, these slow-moving caravans are nothing short of a moving buffet. Enter the Templars. They do not merely ride alongside the wagons, they organise the entire passage. Imagine the scene, a caravan of 300 souls gathering at dawn near the port of Jaffa. There's the bleating of goats, the crying of children, the anxious chatter of travellers from a dozen different duchies who barely understand each other's dialects. Cutting through the chaos is the silence of the Templar escort. They sit atop their massive destriers, horses bred for war, far larger than the local Arab steeds, watching the horizon with the practiced squint of men who know every rock and ravine where an ambush might lie. They ride in a specific formation, a vanguard and a rearguard, creating a mobile fortress of flesh and iron around the vulnerable flock. This is the first time many of these European peasants have seen the knights in person. The sight is striking, the white mantles glowing in the morning light, the red crosses vivid against the fabric, the utter lack of gold or silver ornamentation on their bridles. They look like statues that have decided to move. One of the most profound yet often overlooked aspects of their protection is that they do it for free. In a world where every bridge crossing, every city gate, and every ferry requires a toll, the Templars ask for nothing. They are forbidden by their rule to accept personal gifts. If a grateful merchant tries to press a coin into a knight's hand, he is refused. This radical refusal of personal gain builds a kind of mystique that is almost supernatural to the medieval observer. It suggests that these men are fueled by something other than the universal hunger for profit. Of course, the order as a whole accepts donations, massive ones, but the individual knight remains a figure of austere service. The danger they face is real and constant. The historical record is dotted with small, bloody encounters that never made it into the grand chronicles of kings. A sudden shower of arrows from a ridge, a charge of light cavalry from a hidden wadi, a desperate melee in the dust. In these moments, the Templars' discipline shines. While ordinary knights might break formation to chase glory or loot, the Templars hold the line. Their rule dictates that no brother may leave the ranks without permission. To charge without an order is a sin. To retreat without an order is a disgrace, punishable by expulsion. This discipline turns them into an immovable object. The raiders, realizing that this particular caravan has teeth, often break off the attack, melting back into the desert. The pilgrims are safe, not because of a miracle, but because of a system. We also see them building infrastructure to support this safety. Along the key routes, they construct fortified watchtowers and police stations, simple square keeps, where a small garrison can sleep and store water. One such place is the castle of Le Detroit, built specifically to guard a narrow, dangerous pass near the coast. These are not the grand castles we will see later, but functional, ugly blockhouses designed for one thing: survival. They dig wells, they map the water sources, they learn the local terrain better than the invaders who have lived there for generations. It is a form of medieval nation building, creating a corridor of stability in a land of chaos. Yet there is a softness here too, amidst the armour, the rule of the Templars, commands them to care for the sick and the weak. We have accounts of knights dismounting to let a weary woman or an injured man ride their war horse, while the knight walks in the dust. It is a powerful image, the warrior becoming the servant. This duality is what captures the imagination of Europe. They are the lions of war and the lambs of peace, a contradiction that seems to make perfect sense in the religious fervour of the age. As the sun sets on our caravan, now safely within sight of the walls of Jerusalem, the pilgrims fall to their knees in gratitude. The Templars simply turn their horses and ride back toward the coast, ready to escort the next group. They disappear into the twilight, their white cloaks fading into the grey of the landscape. They have done their job. They have kept the arteries of the kingdom open, but in doing so, they have also begun to inadvertently create something else. By moving so many people and protecting so much wealth, they are beginning to understand the flow of money better than anyone else. The transition from protectors to bankers is not a sudden leap. It is a natural step for men who are already guarding the most valuable things on earth. The road has taught them that safety is a commodity, and soon they will learn how to trade it. The year is 1150, and we find ourselves not on a battlefield, but in the quiet candlelit scriptorium of the Paris Temple. This massive complex, located in the heart of the Marais district, is a city within a city, a fortress of high walls, bustling courtyards, and guarded vaults. Outside, the streets of Paris are a riot of mud, shouting vendors, and clattering carts. Inside there is the scratching of quills on parchment and the clink of silver being counted. The Templars, having mastered the art of protecting physical bodies on the dangerous roads to the east, have now stumbled upon a solution for protecting wealth. It is an innovation that will arguably change the world more than any sword stroke: the letter of credit. Imagine a French noble, let's call him Count Thibaut. He wishes to travel to the Holy Land to pray at the Holy Sepulchre and perhaps kill a few infidels to cleanse his soul. He has a problem. To fund this journey, he needs gold, a lot of it. But carrying a chest of gold coins across France, Italy, and the Mediterranean is suicide. He would be robbed by brigands in Burgundy, pirates in the Adriatic, or corrupt officials in Constantinople long before he ever saw the walls of Jerusalem. So he walks into the Paris temple. He hands over his heavy bag of gold to the Templar treasurer. The brother counts it, weighs it, and then, instead of giving it back, he writes a cryptic note on a small piece of parchment. It is written in a cipher that only the Templars understand. Count Thibaut takes this slip of parchment, sews it into the lining of his tunic, and rides east with nothing but his sword and his clothes. Months later, dusty and sunburnt, Thibaut walks into the Templar headquarters in Acre or Jerusalem. He hands the scrap of parchment to the local treasurer. The brother decodes the cipher, checks the signature, and hands Thibaut the exact value of his deposit in the local currency, minus a small transaction fee. It is magic. It is alchemy. It is the ATM, 800 years before electricity. This system relies entirely on one thing: the immense, unshakable trust that the Templar organization is a single, unified body. The Paris brother and the Jerusalem brother have likely never met, but they operate as one mind, one vault. No other institution in Europe, not even the church or the chaotic monarchies, has this kind of international reach and discipline. This financial network quickly expands beyond simple travel checks. The Templars become the safest deposit box in the world. Kings and queens, paranoid about their own sticky-fingered courtiers, begin to store their crown jewels and treasuries in the Templar vaults. King Henry II of England and King Louis VII of France both use the Templars as their personal bankers. In fact, the Templars become so integral to the financial machinery of the state that the royal treasury of France is physically located inside the Paris Temple for over a century. The Templars are not just storing money, they are managing it. They collect taxes for the Pope. They manage estates for absent crusaders. They offer loans. Technically, usury is forbidden by the Church, but the Templars find clever workarounds. Instead of charging interest, they might rent the money or calculate the loan in one currency and repayment in another, hiding the profit in the exchange rate. It is sophisticated, borderline modern finance run by warrior monks who have sworn a vow of poverty. The irony is thick enough to cut with a knife. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ are now the richest organisation in Christendom. Their wealth is not in personal pockets. An individual knight still owns nothing but his sword and his cloak. But the order owns everything. They own 9,000 manors across Europe. They own their own fleet of ships carrying pilgrims' wool and spices across the Mediterranean. They are exempt from tithes, meaning they pay no tax to the church, yet they collect tithes from their own vast lands. They are a state within a state, a multinational corporation with a standing army. But this wealth brings a new kind of power, and with it, a new kind of resentment. We see the first stirrings of unease among the secular rulers. It is annoying for a king to have to ask a monk for a loan to fight his own wars. It is humiliating for a monarch to know that his crown jewels are behind a lock he does not hold the key to. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal but telling, of King Henry III of England threatening to seize the Templar treasury. The Grand Master at the time reportedly replied, "While you do justice, you will reign. If you infringe it, you will cease to be king." It was a polite way of saying, try it and see what happens. The Templars had become so powerful that they could look a king in the eye and blink last. Yet, amidst the ledgers and the gold, the core purpose remains. The profits from this vast banking empire are not hoarded for luxury. They are funneled relentlessly to the east. The gold of Paris becomes the stone of the Holy Land. Every transaction fee, every estate donation, every tax exemption is converted into walls, weapons, and horses for the defence of the Latin Kingdom. The banking system is the engine, the war machine is the output. And nowhere is this output more visible than in the colossal construction projects that are beginning to rise from the desert floor. The first bankers are about to become the master builders, and their legacy will be written not just in ink on parchment, but in limestone blocks weighing tons, standing defiant against the desert wind. The camera lingers for a moment on the hands of the treasurer in Paris, ink-stained, callous, efficient, before dissolving to the rough, scored hands of a mason in Syria, chiselling a block for a fortress that is meant to last forever. The connection between the two is invisible, a line of credit and faith that stretches across the known world, holding the Crusader states together by the sheer force of gold and will. The camera glides silently over the shimmering heat haze of the Syrian Gap, leaving behind the bustling counting houses of Paris for a landscape that is stark, elemental, and terrifyingly beautiful. We are now in the mid to late 12th century, hovering above the precipices of the Holy Land, where the Templars are engaging in one of the most ambitious construction projects in human history. They are building the stone sentinels. To understand why, we must understand the math of the occupation. The Crusaders are perilously outnumbered. The Latin Kingdom is a thin strip of land, a fingernail clinging to the coast of a vast hostile continent. They cannot field armies large enough to garrison every hill and valley, so they turn to a solution that requires no food, no sleep, and no wages: stone. The Templars, flushed with European gold, begin to buy or build a chain of fortresses that serve as force multipliers, massive anchors in a sea of uncertainty. Look down at the fortress of Tortosa or the tower of Chastelblanc. These are not, mind, the wooden Mott and Bailey castles of early Norman England, which would rot in this sun or burn in an hour. These are mountains rearranged by human hands. They are built of massive limestone blocks, some weighing as much as a small car, cut with such precision that a knife blade cannot fit between them. The style is a fascinating hybrid, and historians still debate the direction of the lesson. Did the Crusaders bring their know-how from the West, or did they learn the secrets of fortification from the Byzantines and Arabs they fought? The answer, as is often the case with history, is a bit of both, mixed with the desperate innovation of survival. We see the introduction of the bent entrance, a gateway that turns sharply, forcing any attacker to expose their unshielded side to murder holes in the ceiling. We see the talus, a sloped face at the base of the wall that prevents sappers from mining underneath and causes drop stones to bounce erratically into the enemy ranks like deadly billiard balls. It is brutal, geometric genius. But let us move inside, through the heavy iron-bound gates into the cool, shadowed belly of the beast. The temperature drops instantly. The blinding glare of the Levant vanishes, replaced by the dim, flickering light of oil lamps. A Templar castle is not a palace. There are no tapestries, no minstrels, no feast halls filled with laughter. It is a machine for living and dying. The layout is monastic. There is the chapel, the spiritual heart of the fortress, often round in imitation of the Holy Sepulchre, where the brothers gather for matins while the stars are still out. There is the chapter house, where business is conducted in low voices, and there are the cisterns. In this arid land, water is more valuable than wine or blood. The Templars build cavernous underground reservoirs, engineering marvels capable of holding enough water to sustain a garrison for years of siege. One can imagine a young knight from the damp green fields of Normandy standing by these dark pools, marvelling at the echo of a single drop, realizing that his life now depends entirely on this hidden reserve. The daily life here is a strange mix of boredom and terror. The brothers polish their mail, tend to their horses in the cool vaulted stables, and stare out from the arrow slits at a landscape that could erupt into violence at any moment. It is a psychological game as much as a military one. These castles are designed to be seen. They dominate the skyline, white and terrible against the blue sky, a constant reminder to the local population that the Franks are here to stay. They control the trade routes, the wells and the harvest. A merchant cannot move his caravan from Damascus to the sea without passing under the shadow of a Templar tower and paying the toll. It is a protection racket, a customs agency, and a military blockade all rolled into one. Yet there is a vulnerability here too, hidden beneath the stone skin. These castles are islands. If the army in the field is destroyed, the castles become prisons. A garrison of 50 knights can hold off an army of thousands, but they cannot leave. They are trapped in their own invincibility. We see this tension in the design of the concentric castle, a castle within a castle. If the outer wall falls, the defenders retreat to the inner wall. If that falls, they retreat to the keep. It is a pessimistic architecture, a design that assumes failure is possible and plans for it in stages. One of the most famous examples, though built slightly later, is Chastel-Pèlerin, or Pilgrim's Castle. It stood on a peninsula jutting into the sea, so massive that it was never taken by siege, only abandoned when the kingdom finally collapsed. Its walls were so thick that when modern engineers examined them, they marvelled at the sheer paranoia required to build them. There is a touch of dark humour in the accounts of the construction, Frankish architects arguing with local stonemasons, trying to explain in broken Arabic and French how to build a Gothic arch in the middle of a desert, likely sweating profusely and cursing the flies. But the result is undeniable. These structures are so sound that many are still standing today, used by subsequent empires, their durability a testament to the Templar budget. As the sun begins to set, casting long purple shadows across the sand, the castle seems to change. It stops being a building and becomes a creature crouching on the hilltop. The bells ring for vespers. The gates are barred, with beams of oak as thick as a man's torso. The brothers gather in the refectory, eating their silent meal while a priest reads from the Bible. Outside, the jackals howl and the wind picks up, whispering against the stone face of the fortress. They are safe for one more night, but the stone, for all its strength, is cold comfort. It isolates them. It separates them from the land they are trying to rule. They are the masters of the horizon, but they are strangers in the valley. And as the century winds toward its close, the enemies outside are learning. They are uniting. The scattered emirs are finding a leader. And soon, not even the thickest walls will be enough to hold back the tide that is rising in the east. The stone sentinels stand watch, but even mountains can be eroded, grain by grain, by the patient, relentless wind of history. The camera moves now from the expansive sun-bleached battlements into the intimate shadowed interior of the preceptory. The wind dies down. The world shrinks to the size of a single room, lit only by the dying embers of a night lamp. It is 4 o'clock in the morning. Outside, the Holy Land is asleep, the desert fox curling into its den, the city gates locked tight. Inside, the silence is broken by the sharp, rhythmic tolling of a bell. It is the call to matins. We are about to witness the paradox of the Templar existence, a life that is half steel, half silence. The brother rises instantly. There is no hitting the snooze button here. The rule is explicit that he must jump from his pallet as if commanded by God himself. He sleeps in his shirt and breeches, a practical measure that serves two purposes: modesty and the readiness to fight if the castle is attacked in the night. He adjusts his heavy woolen blanket, cheap, rough and functional, and steps onto the cold stone floor. He does not speak. From Compline the night before until the end of the morning mass, the grand silence is in effect. If he stubs his toe in the dark, he must suffer in biblical quiet. He moves to the chapel, joining his brothers in the gloom. They are a sea of white shadows, their faces obscured, only their beards visible. In the candlelight, the beard is a crucial detail. In a Europe where clean-shaven faces are the fashion for the pious, the Templars are commanded to wear their beards long and unkempt, a visual marker of their rejection of vanity. They look wild, almost elemental, like Old Testament prophets who have picked up swords. As they chant the Psalms, their voices deep and gravelly from breathing dust and shouting orders, we see the first crack in the traditional monastic mould. These are not soft men. Their hands, folded in prayer, are scarred and calloused. Their knees, bent on the stone, are familiar with the grip of a saddle. They pray for peace, yet they spend every waking moment preparing for war. After Mass, the day breaks with the relentlessness of the desert sun. The brother does not head to a scriptorium to copy manuscripts. He heads to the stables. For a Templar, the horse is not a pet. It is his other half, his engine of war. He has 3 horses, a destrier for battle, a courser for travel, and a pack horse for his gear. He checks their hooves, their teeth, their feed. The rule is surprisingly tender here. A knight can be punished more severely for mistreating his horse than for mistreating himself. If the horse is sick, the knight walks. It creates a bond of absolute trust, vital for the chaos of a cavalry charge. There is a smell here of hay, leather, and horse sweat, the perfume of the crusade. Breakfast is brief, usually just a piece of bread dipped in wine. Then the training begins. Historians have long debated the exact nature of Templar training. Unlike the Shaolin monks of the East, who left detailed manuals of physical forms, the Templars left almost no record of sword drills. Some scholars argue this is because they were already fully trained knights when they joined. You didn't join the Templars to learn how to fight. You joined because you already knew how and wanted to use it for God. Their training, therefore, is likely focused on unit cohesion. They practice riding knee to knee, a solid wall of horseflesh that moves as one organism. They learn to ignore the instinct to break rank and chase glory. In the secular world, a knight fights for his own name. Here, he fights for the order. If he charges without permission, he loses his habit, a social death sentence. If he retreats without permission, he is branded a coward. The only time he can leave the field is if he is outnumbered by more than 3-1, which, given the odds in the Holy Land, is practically a Tuesday. Noon approaches. The heat is a physical weight, pressing down on the helmet and the chainmail. The brother sweats under layers of wool and linen, but he does not complain. Suffering is part of the job description. Lunch is the main meal, eaten in the refectory. The brothers sit two to a bowl. This is a deliberate design to encourage brotherhood and practically to ensure that one brother doesn't hog the best pieces of meat, a medieval solution to portion control. They eat in silence while a clerk reads aloud from the Bible. The food is good, better than most peasants will see in a lifetime. They have meat 3 times a week to keep their strength up, plenty of wine mixed with water, and vegetables. If a brother is feeling particularly pious and wants to fast, he has to ask permission. The master might actually forbid it, telling him to eat his mutton because a starving knight is useless to the defence of the realm. It is a pragmatic holiness. The afternoon brings administrative duties or equipment maintenance. A Templar's kit is standardized and minimal. No gold spurs, no embroidered scabbards, no velvet, just steel and leather. He polishes his mail, rolling it in a barrel of sand and vinegar to scour away the rust. He checks the straps of his shield. He might oversee the local serfs harvesting wheat on the order's vast estates, for the Templars are also landlords, managing the logistics of a kingdom. He is forbidden from hunting, a favourite pastime of the nobility, with one exception. He may hunt lions. The lion is seen as a beast of the devil, a predator that stalks the pilgrims, so killing it is considered a public service. One can only imagine the sheer adrenaline of hunting a lion with a spear and a sword, a recreational activity that makes modern extreme sports look like knitting. As evening falls, the pace slows. Vespers is sung as the purple shadows lengthen across the courtyard. The heat dissipates, replaced by a dry, cool breeze. The brother eats a light supper, perhaps leftovers from lunch. There is a brief period of community, though still restrained. They might sit in the cloister, mending clothes or discussing the news from the frontier. Rumours of Saladin's movements, the arrival of a new ship from France, the price of barley an acre. There is no gambling, no chess, no hawking. It is a life stripped of distractions. Finally, Compline, the last prayer of the day. The grand silence descends once more. The brother returns to his dormitory. He checks his equipment one last time. Sword by the bed, shield within reach. He lies down in his clothes, the lamp burning nearby. As he closes his eyes, he is exhausted. It is a grinding, repetitive life, devoid of the romance the troubadours sing about. There are no damsels to rescue, no tournaments to win, no personal glory to be had, just the smell of horses, the taste of dust, the ache in the muscles, and the absolute terrifying certainty that he is doing God's will. He drifts off to the sound of the wind rattling the shutters, knowing that the bell will ring again in just a few hours. And in the back of his mind, always, is the knowledge that this quiet rhythm is fragile. Any day now, the horn will blow, not for prayer, but for war. And when that happens, the silence of the monastery will be traded for the roar of the battlefield, a transition he has practiced for every single day of his life. The year is 1177, and the wind blowing across the Ascalon plains carries the scent of disaster. We find ourselves in a moment that feels less like history and more like the third act of a tragic play. The kingdom of Jerusalem is not being led by a warrior giant in his prime, but by a 16-year-old boy whose body is slowly rotting while he is still inside it. This is King Baldwin IV, known to history as the Leper King. He is a figure of heartbreaking courage, hiding his ravaged face behind a mask or heavy veils, his hands often bandaged to conceal the loss of sensation and fingers. By all medical logic, he should be in a bed, waiting for the end. Instead, he is strapped onto a horse, unable to hold the reins with his numb hands, steering with his knees and his will alone. He is the fragile heart of a kingdom facing its extinction. Against him rises the son of the East, Saladin. The Sultan of Egypt and Syria has finally united the Muslim world, creating a pincer that squeezes the Crusader states from both sides. Saladin is brilliant, charismatic, and currently a little overconfident. He looks at the boy king and sees weakness. He looks at the fractured Christian nobility and sees opportunity. In November, believing the Crusaders to be pinned down or too afraid to leave their castles, Saladin makes a bold move. He marches his army of 26,000 men out of Egypt and heads straight for Jerusalem. He is so certain of victory that he allows his army to spread out, pillaging the countryside, moving like a slow, heavy flood rather than a spear. He believes there is no one left to stop him, but he has forgotten the Templars, and he has underestimated the boy. At the fortress of Gaza, the Templars have been watching. 80 knights, led by their Grand Master Odo de Santa Mal, a man described by chroniclers as having the pride of Lucifer and the courage of a lion, are garrisoned there. When news reaches them that the king is riding out to meet the invasion with a pitifully small force, the Templars do not hesitate. They break out of Gaza, riding hard through the enemy lines to join their king. When they rendezvous with Baldwin, the numbers are still suicidal, barely 500 knights and a few thousand infantry against Saladin's 26,000. It is not an army, it is a suicide pact. They catch Saladin near the hill of Montgisard, not far from the coast. It is the afternoon of November 25th, the feast of St. Catherine. The scene is surreal. Saladin's army is caught in a moment of relaxation. Baggage trains are being unpacked, horses are being watered, soldiers are scattered. Suddenly, the horizon breaks. Emerging from the glare of the setting sun is the Christian host. In the centre, a bishop raises a piece of the true cross, a relic encased in gold that catches the light like a beacon, and beside it, wrapped in bandages and strapped to his saddle, is the Leper King, prostrated on the ground for a moment of prayer before being lifted back onto his mount. The order is given. The charge that follows is one of the most terrifying displays of heavy cavalry warfare in the Middle Ages. The Templars take the vanguard. They do not trot. They do not skirmish. They spur their massive destriers into a gallop, forming a solid wedge of white mantles and steel. The sound is a rolling thunder, the ground shaking under thousands of hooves. They smash into Saladin's centre with the force of a falling cathedral. Historians still marvel at the physics of this engagement. The Ayyubid army, light and mobile, is designed to dance around heavy opponents, peppering them with the arrows until they collapse from exhaustion. But at Montgisard, there is no room to dance. The Templars hit them before they can form up. The impact is catastrophic. The sheer weight of the Frankish horses shatters the enemy lines. The knights, fueled by what they believe is divine intervention, carve a path straight toward Saladin's personal guard. The Sultan, the master of the East, is stunned. He watches as his elite Mamluks are cut down around him. The invincible army dissolves into panic. The battle becomes a rout. The sun sets on a field of carnage that defies all strategic logic. Saladin, the man who would one day conquer Jerusalem, barely escapes with his life. Chronicles tell us he fled into the night on a racing camel, abandoning his baggage, his gold, and his army. He rides hard across the Sinai desert, harassed by Bedouins, drinking muddy water, returning to Egypt with only a fraction of the magnificent host that had marched out weeks before. It is his greatest humiliation, and a lesson he will never forget. The Franks, for all their infighting, are most dangerous when they are desperate. For the Templars, Montgisard is the apex of their martial legend. It validates everything they believe about themselves, that they are the sword of God, that faith can overcome numbers, that they are invincible. But there is a sombre note to the victory. As they ride back, wiping the blood from their swords, they look at their king. Baldwin has fought with a fury that belies his rotting body, but the effort has drained him. He is a dying star, burning brightest just before it collapses. The victory has bought the kingdom time, perhaps 10 years, but it has not changed the fundamental math. Saladin is young, healthy, and has an empire of millions to draw from. Baldwin has no heir, no health, and a kingdom the size of a small county. The Templars return to their castles, heroes of the hour. They commission murals of the battle. They send letters to Europe boasting of the miracle. Donations surge again. But in the quiet of the chapter house, the older knights must have known. They had won a miracle, yes, but you cannot build a strategy on miracles. They happen only once. The leper king had saved them this time, his broken body acting as a rallying point for the entire Christian world. But nature is cruel, and leprosy does not negotiate. The king is fading, and when he is gone, the unity he forged on the field of Montgisard will fracture. The Templars, so disciplined in war, are about to find themselves navigating a political chaos that no cavalry charge can solve. As the celebration fires burn down and the night settles over the victorious camp, there is a sense of an ending disguised as a beginning. The high water mark has been reached. The tide is about to turn. The Templars stand on the walls of their fortresses, looking south toward Egypt, knowing that Saladin is out there, nursing his pride, rebuilding his army, and remembering the face of the boy who defeated him. He will not make the same mistake twice. The next time he comes, he will not be looking for a raid. He will be looking for a funeral, and the Templars, the guardians of the Holy Land, will be the ones expected to dig the grave. The timeline shifts forward 10 years, and the air grows heavy, suffocating and dry. It is the summer of 1187. The leper king is dead, and with him died the fragile wisdom that held the kingdom together. The throne now belongs to Guy de Lusignan, a man described by history as handsome, charming, and utterly vacant of strategic thought. But the true danger lies not just in the king's weakness, but in the ear of the king. Beside him stands Gerard de Riedefort, the Grand Master of the Templars. Gerard is a man of fire and iron, a warrior who believes that caution is a sin, and that God will always favour the bold. He is the kind of leader who mistakes adrenaline for divine inspiration, and on the other side of the border, Saladin waits. He has not forgotten Montgisard. He has spent a decade preparing for this moment, gathering an army that stretches from the Nile to the Euphrates. He sets a trap at the city of Tiberias, besieging it, knowing that the Crusaders will feel honour-bound to rescue it. He is baiting them to leave the safety of their springs and march into the furnace of the Galilean plateau. On the night of July the 2nd, the Crusader War Council meets in a tense, humid tent near the springs of Sepphoris. It is a clash of egos that will decide the fate of the East. Raymond of Tripoli, a veteran lord who actually owns the city being attacked, begs the king to stay put. Let Tiberias fall, he argues. Better to lose a city than the kingdom. He knows the terrain. He knows there is no water between them and the enemy. But later that night, as the camp sleeps, Gerard de Riedefort slips into the king's tent. He whispers of honour, of shame, of the need to trust in the Templar sword. He implies that Raymond is a traitor in league with Saladin. King Guy, swayed by the last voice he hears, changes his mind. The order is given. At dawn, the army of Jerusalem, 20,000 strong, including the entire flower of the Templar order, marches away from the water and into the desert. It is July 3rd. The heat is a physical enemy, a hammer that strikes the moment the sun clears the horizon. We must pause to imagine the sensory nightmare of a medieval knight in this environment. He is wearing a padded gambeson, over which sits a suit of chainmail weighing 30 pounds, topped with a pot helmet and a woolen surcoat. He is essentially walking inside a convection oven. As the army moves onto the plateau, the temperature soars past 40 degrees Celsius. Their canteens run dry within hours. The dust, kicked up by thousands of hooves and feet, coats their throats, making it impossible to swallow. And all the while, Saladin's light cavalry buzz around them like angry wasps, firing arrows and retreating, refusing to engage, just slowing them down, bleeding them, keeping them moving under the merciless sun. By late afternoon, the Crusader army is not an army. It is a hallucination of thirst. They are forced to camp on a barren twin-peaked hill known as the Horns of Hattin. There is no water here. Below them, they can see the shimmering blue of the Sea of Galilee, tauntingly close but blocked by the Muslim host. The night is worse than the day. Saladin's men, knowing the psychological torture of thirst, light fires in the dry scrub. The smoke drifts up the hill, choking the parched Christians. The Saracens sing and beat drums, keeping the exhausted knights awake. Up on the ridge, the Templars sit in the dark, licking the condensation from their armour, praying for a miracle that Gerard promised, but which has not arrived. When the sun rises on July 4th, it brings not relief, but the end. The wind blows the smoke and fire directly into the Crusader faces. Saladin orders the attack. The battle is less a contest of tactics and more a massacre of the exhausted. The infantry, maddened by thirst, break rank and surge toward the perceived safety of the hills, only to be cut down. The Templars and the King's Knights make desperate, heaving charges, trying to break the ring of steel, but their horses are collapsing under them. In the centre of the chaos, the Bishop of Acre holds the true cross aloft, the golden casing glinting through the smoke, until he too falls, and the most sacred relic in Christendom disappears into the hands of the enemy. The king's red tent is collapsed. The fighting stops. The silence that follows is the silence of total defeat. King Guy and the key nobles are dragged to Saladin's tent. The Sultan, ever the gracious victor, hands the trembling king a cup of iced rosewater, a luxury that must have tasted like heaven in that hellscape. Guy drinks greedily, and then passes the cup to Reynold of Chatillon, a lord Saladin despises for his banditry. Saladin's face hardens. "I did not give you permission to drink," he says. In the desert code of hospitality, to give a man water is to spare his life. Saladin has no intention of sparing Reynold. With a swift motion, the Sultan draws his scimitar and strikes Reynold down right there in the tent. The king shakes in terror, but Saladin calms him, saying, "Kings do not kill kings." But for the Templars, there is no such mercy. Saladin views the military orders, the Templars and the Hospitallers, as impurities that must be cleansed. He knows they are professional fanatics. You can ransom a baron, he will go home and manage his estate. But if you release a Templar, he will simply get a new horse and come back to kill you. They are too dangerous to live. The scene that follows is one of the darkest in the Order's history. 2 days later, the surviving Templar and Hospitaller knights, about 200 of them, are led out at sunrise. Saladin does not assign his soldiers to execute them. Instead, he invites the Sufi mystics and scholars in his camp to do the deed, believing it to be a meritorious act of piety. It is a gruesome, messy affair, as these scholars are not swordsmen. The knights, kneeling in the dust, do not beg. They do not renounce their faith. They maintain the discipline of their rule to the very last second, staring at the rising sun, perhaps finding some strange peace in the fulfillment of their vow to die for the cross. Gerard de Riedefort, the architect of this disaster, is strangely spared, likely because Saladin knows a bad general is more useful to his enemy alive than dead. The news of Hattin hits the Christian world like a physical blow. The Pope, Urban III, is said to have died of shock upon hearing the report. It is the undoing of 80 years of struggle. The field of Hattin is left to the vultures, a graveyard of bones that travellers will describe seeing for decades to come. The Templars have lost the bulk of their fighting force, their reputation for invincibility, and the true cross, but they have lost something even more vital, the illusion that God is obligated to protect them. They have learned, in the hardest way possible, that faith is not a substitute for water, and that zeal without wisdom is just a faster way to the grave. As the sun sets on the horns of Hattin, the road to Jerusalem lies wide open. There is no one left to defend the holy city. The stone sentinels are empty, the shield is shattered, and the bells of the Holy Sepulchre are ringing their final hours under the Christian cross. The wind carries the dust of the Hattin battlefield toward the gates of Jerusalem, but the news arrives faster than the wind. It travels on the lips of terrified refugees, in the eyes of riderless horses returning to their stables, and in the sudden, suffocating silence of the church bells. It is September 1187. The holy city, the prize for which generations have bled, is suddenly an orphan. There's a terrifying demographic reality inside the walls. The city is full, but it is empty. It is packed with women, children, the elderly, and the infirm, refugees from the surrounding villages. But there are almost no soldiers. The flower of the knighthood lies rotting on the horns of Hattin. The king is a prisoner. The Grand Master is a captive. Jerusalem is a city of ghosts waiting to be made flesh. Into this vacuum rides a man who was not supposed to be the hero, Balian of Ibelin. He is a noble of high standing, but he has come to Jerusalem not to fight, but to rescue his wife and family. He even asked Saladin for safe passage to enter the city, promising not to take up arms. Saladin, a man who respects the rules of the game, agreed. But when Balian arrives, the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the terrified citizens beg him to lead them. They absolve him of his oath to the Sultan. In a moment of supreme irony, Balian sends a letter to Saladin effectively saying, "I'm sorry, they won't let me leave, and I have to fight you now." Saladin, illustrating the strange chivalry of the age, not only accepts the apology, but sends an escort to ensure Balian's wife and children are taken safely to the coast before the killing starts. It is a war of gentlemen fought over a slaughterhouse. Balian looks around the city and sees a logistical nightmare. He has knights, about 2 of them. To fill the walls, he knights anyone who can hold a sword. Merchants, squires, even boys of 16. Historians joke that for a brief moment, Jerusalem had the highest concentration of knights in the world, even if half of them didn't know which end of the lance to point. The Templars who remain in the city, those too old or sick to have ridden to Hattin, open their armories. They distribute weapons, food, and hope, though they know the latter is in short supply. Then the inevitable happens. The horizon darkens. Saladin arrives. He brings with him the full weight of his empire, an army that surrounds the city like a rising tide. He sets up his siege engines, and the bombardment begins. For weeks, the air is filled with the crash of stone against stone, the hiss of arrows, and the desperate prayers of a population that remembers all too well what happened in 1099. When the First Crusade took the city, the streets ran ankle-deep in blood. They expect the same, but the walls are strong, and desperation is a powerful mortar. The defenders hold out for nearly 2 weeks, repelling assaults with boiling oil and sheer panic. However, on September 29th, the sappers managed to undermine a section of the wall near the floridly named Gate of Flowers. The tower collapses. The breach is open. The city is lost. But Balian does not surrender immediately. He rides out to meet Saladin for one final poker game. The negotiation that follows is the stuff of legend. Saladin demands unconditional surrender, invoking the memory of the massacre of Muslims 80 years prior. Balian plays his only card, the city itself. He tells the Sultan that if they are not given fair terms, the defenders will kill their own families, burn all their wealth, and, crucially, destroy the dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque before rushing out to die in a suicidal charge. "We will leave you nothing but a heap of stones," he essentially says. It is a bluff of catastrophic proportions, threatening to destroy the holy sites of both faiths to save the people. Saladin, who wishes to take the city intact as a jewel for his crown, blinks. He agrees to a peaceful surrender, but with a catch: ransom. Every Christian must pay a fee to leave. 10 dinars for a man, 5 for a woman, 1 for a child. Those who cannot pay will be sold into slavery. It is a brutal economic filter. The wealthy nobles easily pay their way out. The poor are doomed. And here, in the twilight of the kingdom, the Templars perform their final act of service in the city of their birth. The Order's treasurer opens the vaults beneath the Temple Mount. For decades, they have hoarded gold, acted as bankers, and amassed a fortune that made kings jealous. Now, that fortune is poured out. The Templars and the Hospitallers dump their chests of coin to pay the ransoms of thousands of poor citizens who have no one else to save them. It is not enough to save everyone. Thousands are still marched off in chains. But it is a massive liquidation of assets for the sake of human life. It is the moment where the poor fellow soldiers actually live up to their name, buying freedom for the penniless with the gold of Europe. On October 2nd, 1187, the surrender is official. The date is symbolic. In the Islamic calendar, it corresponds to the anniversary of the Prophet Muhammad's night journey from this very city. The gates open. The great exodus begins. A column of refugees stretches for miles toward the coast, walking away from the homes their grandfathers had died to seize. Saladin waits outside, watching them go. He is merciful by medieval standards. There is no massacre, no looting, but the symbolic transfer of power is absolute. The great golden cross that stands atop the dome of the Rock, which the Templars had used as their church, the Templum Domini, is tied with ropes. As the Muslim army cheers, the cross is dragged down, crashing onto the stone plaza. It is then dragged through the streets, beaten with clubs and scrubbed with rose water to purify the building. For the Templars, the loss is existential. This was their headquarters. Their name, their identity, their spiritual anchor, the Temple of Solomon, is gone. They are now an order in exile. They leave behind the stables where the brotherhood was formed, the underground vaults where they whispered their first prayers, and the stone halls where they became the most feared warriors in the world. As the last Templar rides out of the St. Stephen's Gate, looking back at the dome now reclaimed by the crescent, the era of Jerusalem is over. The bells that had rung out over the Judean hills for nearly a century fall silent, replaced by the melodic, haunting call of the muezzin. The sun sets on a city that has changed hands yet again. Indifferent to the flags that fly over it, the Templars are homeless, but they are not destroyed. They still have their swords, they still have their fleet, and they still have a burning, humiliated desire for revenge. They retreat to the coast, to the city of Tyre and eventually Acre, nursing a wound that will never fully heal. The heart of the order has been ripped out, but the body survives, cold and dangerous, waiting for the ships from the west to bring a new crusade and a new king who plays by different rules. The camera accelerates now, blurring the years into a stream of days and nights. We leap over a century of struggle, past the arrival of Richard the Lionheart, past the brief negotiated returns to Jerusalem, and past the endless, grinding border wars. We land heavily in the year 1291. The location is the port city of Acre. For the last 100 years, since the loss of the Holy City, Acre has been the beating heart of the Crusader kingdom. It is a city of contradictions, a Babylon of vice and a sanctuary of faith, a place where Italian merchants trade silk and spice in the morning, and knights pray for salvation in the evening. It is the wealthiest city on the coast, a glittering jewel jutting out into the Mediterranean. But the air here smells of salt and rot. The end is no longer a possibility. It is a mathematical certainty. The enemy has changed. Saladin's dynasty is gone, replaced by the Mamluks, a caste of slave soldiers who overthrew their masters to forge an empire of iron. They are terrifyingly efficient, disciplined, and driven by a religious zeal that matches the Templars' own. Their Sultan, Al-Ashraf Khalil, has one goal: to push the Franks into the sea, once and for all. He marches on Acre, not with a raiding party, but with a city-killing machine. He brings over 160,000 soldiers and a battery of siege engines so massive they have names like the Victorious. These catapults hurl stones the size of millstones, capable of pulverizing a tower in a single afternoon. Inside the walls, the mood is a strange mix of fatalism and defiance. The defence is led by the Grand Master of the Templars, Guillaume de Beaujeu. He is a weary, pragmatic man who has tried for years to warn Europe that the end is coming, only to be met with indifference. Now he stands on the battlements looking out at the ocean of tents, stretching to the horizon, and knows that no fleet is coming to save them. There are only 14,000 defenders against an army of 160,000. The math is simple. They are going to die. But they are Templars. They do not plan to die quietly. The siege begins in April. For 6 weeks, the sky rains fire and stone. The noise is deafening. The constant thrum-crack of the trebuchets, the crumbling of masonry, the screaming of the wounded. The Mamluk sappers dig like moles beneath the walls, packing tunnels with pitch and pig fat to burn out the foundations. One by one, the great towers of the outer wall begin to crack. The Tower of the Accursed, a key defensive point, becomes the centre of a meat grinder. The Templars and Hospitallers fight shoulder to shoulder in the breach, a white and black wall of steel holding back a river of enemies. It is medieval warfare at its most horrific, close quarters combat in choking dust, where men grapple and stab in the dark, sliding on blood-slicked stones. On May 18th, the final assault begins. The Mamluk drums beat a rhythm that sounds like a giant heart failing. Thousands of enemy soldiers pour through the breaches. Guillaume de Beaujeu, realizing the wall is lost, leads a desperate countercharge to buy time for the civilians to flee to the harbour. It is here, in the chaotic swirling dust of the street, that the Grand Master meets his end. He is not struck down in a duel, but pierced by a thrown spear that punches through a gap in his armour under his armpit. As his knights drag him back, he gasps, "I am not fleeing, I am dead." With his fall, the heart of the defence stops. Panic sweeps the city. The civilian population rushes to the docks in a tidal wave of terror. The scene is apocalyptic. Boats are swamped by desperate families. Wealthy merchants offer bags of gold for a seat on a rowboat, only to be pushed into the water. The horizon is filled with the smoke of burning warehouses. But amidst this collapse, The Templars retreat to their fortress at the southern tip of the city. This is the Templar citadel, the strongest point in Acre, a castle within the city with its back to the sea. Here, the surviving knights and civilians make their last stand. They hold out for 10 more days. The Sultan offers them terms: surrender, and you can leave with your lives. The Templars agree, opening the gates to let a Mamluk detachment in to oversee the evacuation. But the Mamluk soldiers, seeing the women and the wealth inside, break discipline and begin to molest the refugees. The Templars, enraged, slam the gates shut. They draw their swords and slaughter the Mamluk detachment to the last man. The deal is off, the black flag is raised, there will be no surrender. The final act is one of tragic poetry. The Mamluk sappers undermine the foundations of the Great Master's tower, the keep where the last defenders are huddled. On May 28th, the timber props are set on fire. As the foundations burn away, the tower groans. Inside, the knights fight on, knowing the floor is literally dropping out from under them. With a sound like the earth cracking open, the massive tower collapses, sliding into the sea and burying the last of the Templars and their enemies in a single tomb of stone and water. The dust settles over a ruined city. Acre has fallen. The Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, born in the bloody triumph of 1099, has died in the bloody rubble of 1291. The Templars have lost their reason for existing. They are an order founded to protect the Holy Land, and now there is no Holy Land left to protect. They retreat to the island of Cyprus, a short sail away, where they sit in their new headquarters, looking east across the water. They can almost smell the smoke of Acre. They are still rich, still powerful, and still armed, but they are hollowed out. They are ghosts haunting the edge of the world they once ruled, and as they sit in the cool sea breeze of Cyprus, a new question begins to form in the minds of the kings back in Europe. If the Templars have no holy land to fight for, why do they still need all that money? The wind shifts again, carrying us north across the Mediterranean, away from the smoking ruins of Acre to the sun-drenched, rocky shores of Cyprus. It is the year 1292. The air here smells of lemons, sea salt, and stagnation. The Templars have established their new headquarters in the coastal city of Limassol, but it does not feel like a home, it feels like a waiting room. For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, the Order faces a crisis that no amount of sword training can solve, an identity crisis. They are the Knights of the Temple, yet the Temple is lost. They are the defenders of the Holy Land, yet the Holy Land is closed to them. They are an army without a war, a corporation without a product. Imagine the psychological weight on these men. They are warriors, bred for a singular purpose, to kill the enemies of Christ and hold the line in the east. Now they sit in the cypress groves, polishing armour that will not be used, sharpening swords that have nothing to cut but the humid island air. They are like a massive, complex engine that has been thrown into neutral. The noise is deafening, the fuel is burning, but the machine is going nowhere. Unto Jacques de Molay, elected Grand Master in 1292, he is a man of the old breed, pious, unimaginative, and deeply stubborn. He is a soldier, not a diplomat, and certainly not a visionary. While other orders, like the Teutonic Knights, are carving out their own state in Prussia, and the Hospitallers are looking to conquer the island of Rhodes to reinvent themselves as a naval power, Molay has only one idea: do it all again. He spends his days writing letters to the kings of Europe and the Pope, begging for a new crusade. He drafts elaborate invasion plans, calculating the number of galleys and horses needed to retake Jerusalem, but his letters are met with a polite, deafening silence. Europe has crusade fatigue. The kings are busy fighting each other. The economy is shifting. The fervour of the 12th century is dead. Molay is an analogue man in a digital world, trying to sell a war that no one wants to buy. To prove they are still relevant, the Templars make one last desperate grasp at the Holy Land. In 1300, they launch a raid to capture the tiny island of Arwad, just 2 miles off the coast of Syria. It is a speck of rock, barely large enough to hold a fortress, but Mole sees it as a bridgehead, a stepping stone for the great reconquest. They garrison it with a few hundred men, waiting for the Mongol allies they hope will sweep down from Persia to help them crush the Mamluks. But the Mongols never show up in force. Instead, the Mamluks do. In 1302, the Egyptian fleet surrounds the tiny island. The Templars are trapped with their backs to the sea. They surrender, and the last garrison of the Crusades is dragged off to Cairo in chains. With the fall of Ruad, the door to the Holy Land slams shut forever. Now, the resentment begins to curdle. On Cyprus, the Templars are not popular guests. They are armed, exempt from taxes, and answerable only to the Pope, which makes them a nightmare for the local King of Cyprus, Henry II. They meddle in island politics, acting like heavy-handed landlords rather than holy refugees. Tensions rise to the point where the Templars actually participate in a coup to overthrow the king, replacing him with his brother. It is a clumsy flex of muscle that proves they are dangerous to have around. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the optics are terrible. To the average peasant or noble, the Templars are failing at their one job. We send them money to fight the infidel, people grumble, in the taverns of Paris and London, and they lose the Holy Land. So why are they still rich? The Order's immense wealth, once seen as a necessary war chest, is now viewed with suspicion. Their secrecy, once a sign of elite discipline, now looks like they are hiding something. Why do they hold their chapter meetings at night? Why are outsiders forbidden from entering their lodges? In the vacuum of information, rumours begin to fester like mould in a damp cellar. There is also a growing pressure from the Church to merge the military orders. The Pope argues that if the Templars and Hospitallers combined, they would be less wasteful and more effective. The Hospitallers are savvy. They are open to change, but Jacques de Molay refuses. He writes a long, tedious memorandum explaining why the orders must remain separate, citing differences in rules and traditions. He is fighting a bureaucratic war to preserve the status quo, unaware that the ground is crumbling beneath his feet. He believes the order is untouchable because it has always been untouchable. He believes the Pope is his shield. But the world has produced a new kind of predator, one who cares nothing for tradition or papal shields. In France, King Philip IV sits on his throne, watching the Templars with cold, calculating eyes. He does not see a holy order. He sees a bank account that he desperately needs to raid. He sees a state within a state that challenges his absolute authority. And as Jacques de Molay travels from Cyprus to France in 1306, carrying with him the books and ledgers of the order, he thinks he is going to discuss a new crusade. In reality, he is walking into a trap that has been set with the precision of a spider weaving a web. The beached whale of the Templar order is about to be harpooned. The camera glides now from the sun-drenched, stagnant olive groves of Cyprus to the grey, rain-slicked cobblestones of Paris. It is the year 1306. The air is cold, smelling of wood smoke, and the damp chill rising from the river Seine. We are entering the court of King Philip IV of France, a man known to history as Philippe le Bel, Philip the Fair, but do not let the name fool you. He is fair only in the sense that he is startlingly handsome, with flaxen hair and eyes of piercing icy blue. In character, he is anything but fair. His contemporaries called him the Iron King or the Statue, for he possessed a terrifying stillness. He would sit in his council chamber for hours, unmoving, unblinking, listening to his advisors, with the impassive face of a marble idol. He is a new kind of monarch, not a warrior shouting on a battlefield, but a bureaucrat ruling from a shadowed room. And he has a problem that no amount of staring can solve. He is broke. France is technically the wealthiest kingdom in Europe, but Philip has spent every penny and more on endless grinding wars with England and Flanders. His treasury is an echo chamber. To fill it, he has already tried everything. He has taxed the clergy, infuriating the Pope. He has debased the currency, mixing cheap copper into the silver coins until they are worth a fraction of their face value, a move that earned him the nickname the Counterfeit King and caused riots in the streets of Paris. In fact, during one of these riots, the mob besieged the royal palace and Philip was forced to flee for his life. And where did he hide? In the headquarters of the Knights Templar. For 3 days, the King of France lived as a guest inside the Paris temple. It must have been a humiliating experience for a man of his pride. He slept in their beds, ate their bread, and was protected by their swords. But while he was there, safe behind their massive walls, he saw something else. He saw the vaults. He saw the clerks counting stacks of silver that would dwarf the royal revenue. He saw the sheer staggering efficiency of the Templar state. He realized that the men protecting him were not just monks, they were bankers who held the mortgage on his kingdom. Philip owed the Templar order a fortune. The debt was a noose around his neck, tightening with every passing month. And as he sat in the temple, watching the brothers go about their silent work, a dangerous thought began to take root in his cold, calculating mind. Why pay the debt when you can simply remove the creditor? But a king cannot just rob a holy order. The Templars are answerable only to the Pope. To touch them is to risk excommunication, the spiritual death penalty of the Middle Ages. Philip needs a reason so horrific, so blindingly scandalous, that it would override the Pope's authority and turn the public against the knights. He needs a monster. And to build a monster, he turns to his right-hand man, Guillaume de Nogaret. Nogaret is a character who deserves his own dark chapter in history. He is the keeper of the seals, a lawyer with a razor-sharp mind and a complete lack of moral scruples. If Philip is the statue, Nogaret is the chisel. He hates the church, having lost his own parents to the inquisitors, and he serves the state with a terrifying secular zeal. Together, they begin to compile a dossier. They do not look for facts, they look for rumours. They find a renegade former Templar, a man named Escon de Floiran, who is currently sitting in a prison cell for murder. Esquin is willing to say anything to save his own neck. He whispers tales of secret initiations, of spitting on the cross, of obscene kisses, and worshipping a severed head. These are stock charges, the urban legends of medieval heresy, used against everyone from the Cathars to political enemies. But Philip and Nogaret treat them as gospel. They begin to craft a narrative. They paint the Templars, not as heroes, but as a cancer eating the heart of Christendom. They have lost the Holy Land because God has abandoned them, the whispers go. They are rich because they worship Mammon, not Christ. It is a masterclass in propaganda. They work in absolute secrecy. This is the most dangerous part of the plan. The Templars have garrisons everywhere. They have a fleet. They have thousands of trained killers. If the Order realizes what is coming, they could overthrow the king in a week. The element of surprise is the only weapon Philip has. Meanwhile, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, is oblivious. He is currently in France, having travelled from Cyprus to discuss the possibility of a new crusade with the Pope and the King. He is treated with honour. Philip smiles at him, or at least does the statue equivalent of a smile. The king even asks Molay to be the godfather to one of his children. It is a chilling detail, the king holding his child at the baptismal font, standing next to the man he is planning to burn. Mole, a simple soldier who takes people at their word, sees only a pious monarch. He hears the rumours of heresy, yes, but he dismisses them as the jealous gossip of the rabble. He trusts the system. He trusts the king. He believes that the white mantle is a shield that cannot be pierced by lawyers. The tension in Paris during the summer of 1307 is palpable, though only to those who know where to look. The royal scribes are working overtime, copying hundreds of sealed letters. These are the arrest warrants. The logistics are staggering. Philip intends to arrest every single Templar in France, thousands of men, at the exact same moment, so that no one can escape to warn the others. It is a police raid on a continental scale, something that has never been attempted before. The messengers ride out in September, carrying the sealed orders to the local bailiffs and seneschals in every province, Normandy, Gascony, Languedoc. The orders come with strict instructions. Do not open until the night of October 12th. As the leaves begin to turn golden brown along the Seine, the trap is set. Philip sits in his palace, watching the sun set, waiting. He is about to gamble his entire kingdom. If he fails, the Templars will rally, the Pope will excommunicate him, and his reign will end in civil war. If he succeeds, he will wipe out his debt and seize the greatest treasure in Europe. It is a high-stakes game of chess, played in the dark, and the Knights Templar, the Lions of the East, are sleeping soundly in their beds, dreaming of Jerusalem, unaware that the real enemy is not the Sultan with a scimitar, but the king with a pen. The air grows colder, the nights grow longer, and the dawn of Friday the 13th is approaching. The night of October 12th, 1307, settles over France like a heavy woolen blanket. In the countryside, the harvest is finished, and the fields are bare and quiet under the autumn moon. In the cities, the fires are banked, and the streets are empty, save for the stray dogs and the night watchmen. It is a peace that feels absolute. Yet beneath the surface, the kingdom is vibrating with a secret kinetic energy. In every province, from the mist-shrouded coast of Normandy to the sun-baked vineyards of Languedoc, royal officials, bailiffs, seneschals and provosts are sitting in their chambers staring at sealed parchments that have been resting on their desks for weeks. The wax seals are unbroken, the instructions clear. Open only at dawn on the morrow. There is a weight to this synchronized silence, a breath held by the entire machinery of the state. Inside the Templar preceptories, the brothers are asleep. They sleep in their shirts and breeches as the rule dictates, their swords hanging by their beds, ready for a Saracen raid that will never come. They dream of the hot winds of Acre or the price of wool in Flanders, unaware that the enemy is already standing on their doorstep, not with a scimitar, but with a scroll. As the sky begins to bruise with the first purple light of dawn, the seal is broken. It is Friday, the 13th of October. The officials read the orders, and their eyes likely widen in disbelief. The command is total. Arrest every Templar, seize every asset, secure every archive. There is no room for hesitation. The king has spoken. In Paris, the drama unfolds with the precision of a theatrical execution. Guillaume de Nogaret, the king's shadow, leads the raid personally. He does not march with a fanfare of trumpets. He moves with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of a creeping fog. A large force of armed royal guards surrounds the massive complex of the Paris Temple. The towers, which had sheltered the king himself just a year prior, now loom silent and dark against the grey morning sky. The guards pound on the heavy oak gates. "Open in the name of the king." The porter, confused, perhaps thinking it is a royal messenger, unbars the way. The floodwaters of the French monarchy pour into the courtyard. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, is likely roused from his prayers or his sleep. He is an old man now, in his 60s, his body scarred from decades of service in the East. He comes out to meet the intruders, perhaps expecting a diplomatic crisis, a demand for a loan, or a political summons. Instead, He is met with the point of a spear and a piece of parchment that accuses him of crimes so grotesque they defy the imagination. The warrant charges the order with denying Christ, spitting on the cross during initiation, worshipping a mysterious idol called Baphomet, and engaging in obscene kisses and institutionalized sodomy. The words hang in the cold morning air like poisonous smoke. Mole, a man who has buried friends in the desert for the sake of the cross, stands accused of being its greatest enemy. He surrenders without a fight. There is no clash of steel, no last stand in the keep. The shock is too absolute. The Templars are soldiers, trained to fight armies, not the laws of their own country. They are paralysed by the sheer audacity of the betrayal. Across France, the scene repeats itself in 1,000 variations. In the great commanderies, knights are dragged from their beds. In the small rural farms where only 2 or 3 aging brothers live, tending to sheep and vines, the local sheriff arrives to clap them in irons. These are not all warriors. Many are serving brothers, farmers, accountants and servants who wear the cross but have never held a sword. They are bewildered, terrified, herded like cattle into wagons, and carted off to the nearest royal dungeon. The king's net is so fine that almost no one slips through. It is a masterstroke of police work, a raid so comprehensive that it would be impressive if it weren't so tragic. By noon, the Templar order in France has effectively ceased to exist. The preceptories are sealed. The archives, the ledgers, the letters, the deeds to thousands of acres of land are seized by royal clerks who swarm over the desks like locusts. King Philip IV does not wait. He rides to the Paris temple that very day and takes up residence. He walks into the treasury, the room he has coveted for years, and finally the locks are his. The gold that was meant to rebuild Jerusalem now flows into the bankrupt coffers of the French crown. This day, Friday the 13th, has echoed down through history as the origin of the superstition that the date is cursed. Scholars and folklorists debate this, often pointing out that the number 13 and Friday were both considered unlucky long before the Templars fell, 13 being the number of diners at the Last Supper, and Friday being the day of the crucifixion. Yet it is undeniable that the catastrophe of the Templars cemented the date in the cultural memory of the West. It is the archetype of the bad day, the moment when the world turns upside down, when the protectors become the prisoners and the holy become the damned. It feels too perfect, too cinematic to be a coincidence, as if history itself decided to mark the tragedy with a calendar date that would never be forgotten. But as the sun sets on that fateful Friday, the horror is only just beginning. The arrest is merely the opening move. The king knows that seizing the men is not enough. He must destroy their reputation. He cannot just steal their money. He must prove they didn't deserve it. The charges he has fabricated are designed to do exactly that. They are heresy, a crime that strips a man of all legal rights. A heretic has no property. A heretic has no voice. And to prove heresy, Philip does not need evidence. He needs confessions. The brothers are thrown into solitary confinement. They are separated from their friends, their leaders, and their familiar routines. The silence of the monastery is replaced by the silence of the dungeon, broken only by the dripping of water and the squeak of rats. They are left to stew in their confusion. Why has the king done this? Where is the Pope? Surely Clement the Shy will demand their release. Surely this is a mistake. But no help comes. Instead, the inquisitors arrive. These are men with cold eyes and instruments of iron, men who believe that pain is a pathway to truth. They do not ask the Templars if they worship the devil. They ask them how they did it. The narrative has already been written. The knights are just expected to sign it in blood. The psychological shock of that day cannot be overstated. Imagine a modern Navy SEAL team being arrested by their own government, accused of treason and witchcraft. and thrown into a hole without trial. The cognitive dissonance is shattering. These men had defined their entire lives by their loyalty to the church and the crown. Now, the crown has locked them up, and the church is silent. As the cold autumn night descends over Paris, Jacques de Molay sits in a cell in the very building he once commanded, listening to the footsteps of his jailers on the stones above. The lions of the east are caged. The white mantles are stripped away, leaving only frightened, vulnerable men shivering in the dark. And in the royal palace, King Philip sleeps soundly, his debt erased, his power absolute, unaware that he has just lit a fire that will burn for centuries, scorching his own dynasty and birthing a legend that will outlive his stone walls. The dawn of the Templars is over. The long night of the interrogation has begun. The heavy iron door slams shut, sealing out the light of the world, and the timeline descends into the subterranean nightmare of the French dungeons. We are now deep within the bowels of the Paris Temple, the royal prisons, and the various keeps across France where the brothers have been scattered like seeds in rocky soil. It is late October 1307. The initial shock of the arrest has faded, replaced by a terrifying clarity. They are in the hands of the Inquisition, or rather, they are in the hands of the king's men acting with the methods of the Inquisition. The distinction matters little to a man strapped to a table. The atmosphere in these cells is thick with the smell of damp straw, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of fear. The silence of the monastic life has been traded for a different kind of quiet. The heavy, suffocating silence of anticipation, broken only by the scratching of a scribe's quill and the occasional jagged scream echoing from down the corridor. We must understand the psychology of the men in these cells. They are knights. Yes, they have faced death on the battlefield. They have seen limbs severed by scimitars and bodies riddled with arrows. But battlefield courage is different from the courage required in a torture chamber. On the field, you have a sword, you have adrenaline, you have your brothers beside you. Here, you are naked, bound, and alone. You are fighting an enemy you cannot strike. Pain. And the pain is being inflicted not by heathens, but by fellow Christians, by priests and officials who claim to be saving your soul. The cognitive dissonance is enough to shatter the mind before the first bone is broken. The torture methods employed are brutal and efficient. The most infamous involves coating the feet of the prisoner in fat or oil and holding them over a brazier of burning coals. It is a slow, agonizing destruction of the flesh, designed not to kill, but to maximize suffering while keeping the victim conscious. One knight, calmer than the rest, would later testify that he was tortured so severely that the bones of his heels dropped out of his feet like stones from a ruined wall. Others are subjected to the strappado, their hands tied behind their backs and then hoisted into the air by a pulley, dislocating the shoulders and leaving them hanging in agony for hours. And through it all, the Inquisitor sits calmly, asking the same questions over and over. Did you deny Christ? Did you spit on the cross? Did you worship the head? Getty images, under this duress, the truth becomes fluid. A man will say anything to stop the fire. And so, the confessions begin to flow. They are suspiciously uniform, a laundry list of depravities that matches the king's arrest warrant almost word for word. They confess to spitting on the crucifix during their initiation ceremony. They confess to obscene kisses, being kissed on the navel, the base of the spine, or the mouth by the receiving officer. And they confess to worshipping an idol. This idol is the dark star of the Templar trials, Baphomet. The descriptions of Baphomet vary wildly, which is a telltale sign of fabrication. Some knights describe it as a severed human head with a white beard. Others say it was a cat. Others say it had 3 faces. No physical idol was ever found in any Templar house. Not a single statue, painting or relic that matched these descriptions. Historians generally agree that Baphomet was likely a corruption of Muhammad, reflecting the Crusaders' misunderstood contact with Islam, or perhaps a garbled reference to a reliquary containing the skull of a saint. But in the dim light of the dungeon, Baphomet becomes a monster, a catch-all for every fear the medieval mind held about heresy. Yet amidst the lies extracted by fire, scholars still debate whether there was a kernel of twisted truth hidden in the confessions. Some historians argue that the spitting on the cross might have been a real ritual, but not of heresy, rather a form of hazing or obedience testing. The theory goes that the Templars, preparing for capture by Saracens, might have forced new recruits to simulate apostasy. If a sultan holds a sword to your throat and tells you to spit on the cross, will you do it to save your life? If the recruit refused, he was praised. If he did it, he was humiliated but taught a lesson in survival. It is a plausible theory, suggesting that the grim humour of the barracks was twisted by the prosecution into a satanic rite. But whether it was a hazing ritual gone wrong or a complete fiction invented by the king, the result is the same: the brothers break. The most devastating blow comes not from the rack, but from the top. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, confesses. He admits to the denial of Christ and the spitting on the cross. Why? He was an old man, likely terrified, perhaps hoping that a quick confession would secure mercy for his order, or perhaps he was tricked, told that the Pope had already sanctioned the confessions. Whatever the reason, his admission is a catastrophe. If the father of the order admits to the sin, how can the sons deny it? The dominoes fall. Hundreds of knights confess. The king's scribes record it all, creating a mountain of parchment that validates the seizure of the Templar fortune. However, we must look outside of France to see the truth. In England, Spain, and Germany, where the King of France's reach is weak and torture is not legally permitted, or not applied with such zeal, the Templars deny everything. In England, the knights are bewildered. They testify that they have never heard of Baphomet, never spat on a cross, and that their order is pious. In Spain, they fight back, barricading themselves in their castles and proclaiming their innocence. This geographical disparity is the smoking gun of history. The guilt of the Templars is directly proportional to the amount of torture applied. Where there is fire, there are confessions. Where there is law, there is silence. This proves, almost beyond a doubt, that the trials were a political hit job, not a religious purge. But inside the cells of Paris, such logic offers no comfort. The psychological toll is immense. Many knights go mad in solitary confinement. Others die of starvation or infection from their wounds. They are men who define themselves by their community, by the shoulder-to-shoulder solidarity of the line. Now they are atomized. They are told that their brothers have betrayed them, that their master has betrayed them, that the Pope has abandoned them. They are spiritually orphaned. The white mantle, once a symbol of the highest honour in Christendom, is now a mark of shame. They are stripped of their habits, forced to wear rags, and left to rot in the dark. There is a profound sadness in reading the transcripts of these interrogations. You hear the voices of confused, simple men, men who joined the order to serve God, who spent their lives guarding dusty roads and praying in stone chapels, now being forced to recite lines from a script they don't understand. "I did it because the others did," one whispers. "I was afraid," says another. "I would have killed God himself if you asked me to, just to stop the pain," a third might have thought, though the scribes would never write that down. As the winter of 1307 sets in, the dungeons of France are filled with broken men. The proud order that once stood toe-to-toe with Saladin has been reduced to a collection of weeping, crippled victims. The secret of the Templars is revealed to be nothing more than the capacity of human beings to inflict suffering on one another for gold. And yet, in the midst of this darkness, a small flicker of resistance begins to burn. A few knights, having recovered from the initial shock, begin to realize the magnitude of the lie. They begin to recant. They begin to whisper to each other through the walls. They realize that they have been tricked. And slowly, the paralysis of fear gives way to the indignation of the innocent. The king has his confessions, yes, but he has not yet killed the truth. It is hiding there, in the bruised hearts of the prisoners, waiting for a chance to speak, even if the price of speaking is fire. The camera shifts now from the dank, screaming darkness of the dungeons to the velvet-draped, suffocating luxury of the papal court. The year is 1300. We are in Poitiers, and later Avignon, where the papacy has effectively become a guest, some would say a hostage, of the French crown. At the centre of this golden cage sits Pope Clement VI. History often remembers him as a weakling, a puppet, whose strings were pulled by King Philip. But the truth is more tragic. Clement is a man trapped in a geopolitical vice. He is intelligent, a skilled canon lawyer, and he knows, deep down, that the charges against the Templars are absurd. He knows that an order of monks does not suddenly decide en masse to worship a cat, head, and spit on the Saviour after 2 centuries of dying for him. But Clement is also a man of frail health, suffering from chronic illness, and he is staring down the barrel of a loaded gun held by the most powerful monarch in Europe. Philip IV has made his threat clear. If the Pope does not condemn the Templars, the king will not only destroy the papacy's influence in France, but he will also launch a posthumous heresy trial against Clement's predecessor, Pope Boniface VIII. It is a blackmail threat of nuclear proportions. To dig up a dead pope and brand him a heretic would shatter the moral authority of the Church forever. So, Clement plays a desperate game of delay and investigation. He tries to wrestle control of the trials away from the king. He suspends the inquisitors. He demands that the Templar leaders be brought to him for questioning. But Philip, ever the strategist, blocks these moves, claiming that the roads are too unsafe to transport the prisoners. It is a lie, but a polite one. In response, Clement sends 3 of his most trusted cardinals to the castle of Chinon, where Jacques de Molay and other high-ranking officers are being held. This mission, conducted in August 1308, results in one of the most significant documents in Templar history, the Chinon Parchment. For centuries, this document was believed lost, a ghost of history. It was only rediscovered in the Vatican secret archives in 2001, misfiled in a box of 17th century papers. Its contents are explosive. The parchment reveals that the cardinals interrogated the Templar leaders and found them guilty of nothing serious. They found no heresy. They found no idol worship. They found that the spitting was likely a crude, misguided initiation ritual designed to test obedience, a military hazing gone wrong, but not a rejection of Christ. Crucially, the document shows that the Pope absolved Jacques de Molay and the Templars of heresy. He granted them forgiveness and restored them to the communion of the Church. In the eyes of God and the Pope, the Templars were innocent of the capital charges. But innocence, in the 14th century, is no defence against politics. When the cardinals return with this news, Clement realises he has a problem. He knows they are innocent, but he cannot save them without destroying the Church. If he declares them innocent publicly, Philip might invade the Papal States or cause a schism. Clement is forced to make a utilitarian calculation. Is it better to let one order of knights die to save the entire institution of the Church? He chooses the Church. He suppresses the Chinon Parchment, burying the truth in the archives, and proceeds with the Council of Vienne in 1311. The Council of Vienne is a grand ecclesiastical gathering meant to decide the fate of the order once and for all. The bishops gathered there are largely uncomfortable. They have heard the rumours, they have seen the forced confessions, they smell a rat. Many want to let the Templars defend themselves, but Philip IV is not leaving anything to chance. He arrives at the council with a small army, sitting ominously in the gallery, staring down the bishops. The message is clear: vote the right way or else. Under this crushing pressure, Clement V issues the papal bull Vox in excelso on March 26, 1312. The wording of this bull is a masterpiece of legal evasion. Clement does not convict the Templars of heresy. He admits that the charges have not been proven. However, he argues that the reputation of the order is so irrevocably damaged by the scandal that it can no longer function. Who would join them now? Who would donate to them? Therefore, he dissolves the order, not by definitive sentence, but by way of apostolic provision. It is an administrative firing, not a criminal conviction. It is the medieval equivalent of saying, we can't prove you stole the money, but the bad press is hurting the company, so we're letting you go. With the stroke of a pen, the Knights Templar cease to exist. But what of their wealth? This is where Philip's plan hits a snag. The king had hoped to absorb the vast Templar estates into the royal domain, but Clement, perhaps showing a final flash of spine, decrees that all Templar property shall be transferred to their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller. It is a brilliant move to keep the money within the church. Philip is furious, but he manages to extract a massive fee from the Hospitallers for the expenses of the imprisonment and trials, effectively looting the cash while losing the land. The Hospitallers, for their part, are suddenly the wealthiest order in the world, inheriting the castles, farms and vineyards of their brothers. The tragedy of Clement V is the tragedy of a man who tried to be a politician in a time that demanded a saint. He saved the church from a war with France, but the price was the blood of innocent men. He knew the truth. He wrote it down and then he hid it. As the Council of Vienne concludes, the bureaucracy of the dissolution begins. The Templar signs are taken down from their buildings. The white mantles are folded away. The brothers are pensioned off, sent to other monasteries, or left to drift into poverty. But for the leadership, Jacques de Molay and his closest lieutenants, there is no pension. They remain in prison, the loose ends of a conspiracy that has already succeeded. They are the ghosts of a dead order, waiting for a final sentence that the Pope is too ashamed to deliver himself. And so the file is passed back to the king. The dilemma is resolved not by justice, but by silence. And in the silence, the pile of wood on the Ile des Juifs begins to grow. The calendar turns to March 18th, 1314. It has been 7 long, grinding years since the dawn raids of Friday the 13th. The world has moved on, as the world always does. The Templar estates have been handed over, the gold has been spent, and the scandal has faded into the background noise of medieval life. But in Paris there is one final act to be played. A scaffold is erected in the parvis of Notre Dame Cathedral, a wooden stage raised high above the cobblestones, so that the people of Paris can witness the final humiliation of the order. The atmosphere is not one of bloodlust, but of closure. The crowd gathers, expecting a scripted performance. They have been told that the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, and the preceptor of Normandy, Geoffrey de Charnay, will publicly confess their crimes one last time, receive a sentence of perpetual imprisonment, and then vanish into the shadows of history. It is meant to be a bureaucratic funeral, a stamping of papers to confirm that the lions have been tamed. Jacques de Molay is brought out into the spring sunlight. He is an old man, now 70, his hair and beard white and matted, his body frail from years of dungeon rations and the lingering ache of torture. He blinks in the brightness. Beside him stands Geoffrey de Charnay, equally broken. The cardinals read out the charges and the confessions that were extracted years ago. They recite the list of horrors, the spitting, the idols, the denial of God. The crowd murmurs. It is a grim, predictable ritual. The cardinals turn to Mole and ask him to confirm these truths before the people and God. This is the moment the script calls for a nod, a mumbled yes, and a head bowed in shame. But Jacques de Molay does not bow. In a moment that electrifies the square, the old man straightens his back. He looks at the cardinals, then at the silent crowd, and he speaks with a voice that is suddenly terrifyingly clear. I think it only right that at so solemn a moment, when my life has so little time to run, I should reveal the deception which has been practiced and speak up for the truth, he declares. The cardinals freeze. Mole continues, his voice rising over the wind. Before heaven and earth, and all of you here, as my witnesses, I admit that I am guilty of the grossest iniquity. But the iniquity is that I have lied in admitting the disgusting charges laid against the order. I declare, and I must declare, that the order is innocent. Its purity and saintliness are beyond question. Geoffrey de Charny, emboldened by his master, shouts his agreement. The script is shattered. The cardinals are stunned into silence. This is not a confession, it is a counterattack. It is a public accusation that the king and the church have lied. The crowd erupts in confusion. The cardinals, panicked and unsure what to do with unrepentant heretics who have just gone off script, order the men taken back to the provost of Paris while they deliberate. But news travels fast. It travels across the river to the palace of the Louvre, where King Philip is eating his dinner. When Philip hears the news, he does not consult his lawyers. He does not summon the inquisitors. He does not wait for the church to pass a formal sentence of relapse. He is seized by a cold, furious rage. This is the one thing he cannot tolerate: defiance. He stands up from his table and issues a command that is as illegal as it is absolute. Burn them, tonight. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the Seine. On a small, muddy spit of land known as the Ile des Juifs, the island of the Jews, located near the tip of the Ile de la Cité, a pyre is hastily constructed. It is not a pile of dry, quick-burning wood intended for a merciful death. The chroniclers tell us the wood was piled slowly, methodically, and perhaps damp, or arranged in a way to roast the victims rather than consume them quickly. The king wants them to feel the error of their ways. Crowds line the banks of the river as twilight falls. The two old knights are dragged to the stakes. They do not struggle. Accounts of the execution describe a surreal calm settling over them. They strip off their clothes down to their shirts. They allow themselves to be bound. When the executioners move to tie their hands, Malay asks a final favour. Let me join my hands a little, for I am going to die God's death. He asks to be turned to face the cathedral of Notre Dame, so that his last sight might be the house of the God he never actually denied. The torches are touched to the wood. The fire begins to crackle. As the heat rises, curling the skin and singeing the hair, the silence of the island is broken not by screams of agony, but by prayers. They sing hymns. They proclaim their innocence to the very end. And then, from the heart of the flames, legend tells us that Jacques de Molay unleashes his final weapon. It is not a sword, but a summons. Staring through the smoke, perhaps imagining he can see the king watching from his palace window, he shouts, God knows who is wrong and has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death. The specific wording of the curse of the Templars has been debated and embellished by novelists and historians for centuries. The most famous version has him crying out, Pope Clement, King Philip, I summon you to the tribunal of heaven within a year to receive your judgment. Cursed, cursed, you shall be cursed to the 13th generation of your blood. Whether he said these exact words is a matter of folklore, but the sentiment was clear. He was appealing his case to the only court higher than the King of France. The fire climbs higher, the voices fade, the bodies of the last Templars slump against the chains, reduced to carbon and ash. The smell of burnt flesh drifts over the city of Paris, mixing with the cool night air. The king's justice is done. The threat is extinguished. But as the embers die down, a strange thing happens. The crowd does not cheer, they do not disperse in triumph. Instead, they wade into the shallow water, they swim to the island, they scoop up the cooling ashes and the bits of charred bone, pressing them into their handkerchiefs, as if they were the relics of saints. In the eyes of the people, the heretics have died as martyrs. Philip watches from his palace, perhaps satisfied. He is won. The order is dead. The leaders are ash. The money is, mostly, his. But as he turns away from the window, he cannot know that the fire he lit on the Ile des Juifs has not really gone out. It has simply changed forms. The physical order of the temple is destroyed, yes, but the idea of the temple, the myth of the secret, the martyr, and the curse has just been born in the flames. And what makes the legend truly terrifying is not the words Mole spoke, but what happens next. The universe, it seems, was listening to the old man in the fire. The clock starts ticking. A year is not a long time, and in the palaces of the Pope and the King, the shadows are already beginning to lengthen, stretching toward a darkness that no amount of gold can hold back. The smoke from the Ile des Juifs dissipates into the Parisian sky, but the heavy, acrid scent of burning seems to cling to the clothes of the King and the Pope, a sensory reminder of the deed that cannot be washed away. It is April 1314, barely a month since Jacques de Molay screamed his final summons through the flames. The world is waiting. Superstition in the Middle Ages is not a fringe belief. It is the operating system of reality. People watch the skies for comets. They watch the flight of birds. And now they watch the health of the two men who killed the Templars. They do not have to wait long. Pope Clement V is the first to answer the summons. He has retreated to his castle at Rocamore in the south of France, fleeing the heat and perhaps the ghosts of Paris. He has always been a frail man, prone to stomach ailments, but suddenly his condition deteriorates with terrifying speed. His physicians helpless, he withers away in agony, his stomach rejecting all food, his body consuming itself from the inside out. On April 20th, just 33 days after the execution, the Vicar of Christ is dead. But the universe, it seems, has a flair for the dramatic. During his lying in state in the church at Carpentras, a violent thunderstorm erupts over the city. A bolt of lightning strikes the church, tearing through the roof and igniting the timber. The fire spreads to the bier where the Pope's body lies. By the time the flames are extinguished, the body of Clement V has been half consumed by fire, a grotesque mirroring of the fate he decreed for the Grand Master. The common people whisper in the streets, "The fire has come for him." It is a coincidence so precise that it feels scripted by a vengeful author, reinforcing the belief that the curse is not a myth, but a mechanism already in motion. But the Iron King remains. Philip thus sits on his throne in Paris, seemingly untouched. He is 46 years old, in the prime of his life, a man of vigorous health who spends his days hunting and his nights managing the most powerful kingdom in Christendom. He likely dismisses the Pope's death as the natural end of a sickly man. He has won, hasn't he? The Templar gold is in his treasury. The order is dissolved. He is the master of his destiny. Summer passes into autumn. The leaves turn gold in the forests of Halate, the king's favourite hunting ground. It is November 1314. The air is crisp, the ground hard with the first frost. Philip rides out with his retinue, chasing a stag or perhaps a boar. The accounts vary. He is deep in the woods, separated from the main party, galloping through the trees with the reckless speed of a man who fears nothing. And then the inexplicable happens. A distraction, a hidden route, a sudden stroke. The Iron King collapses. Some chroniclers say a wild boar charged his horse. Others say he simply fell from the saddle without cause, struck down by an invisible hand. He is carried back to the palace of Fontainebleau, paralysed and unable to speak. For weeks, he lingers in a twilight state, his mighty will trapped in a broken body. He dies on November 29th, 1314. He had survived the Grand Master by exactly 8 months. The timeline is complete. Both accusers have stood before the tribunal of heaven within the year. If the story ended here, it would be a spooky anecdote, but history decides to twist the knife. The curse, it appears, was not just for the men, but for their bloodline. The Capetian dynasty is known as the miracle of the Capetians because for over 300 years, from 987 to 1314, every single French king had produced a male heir to succeed him. It was a genetic winning streak unparalleled in European history. Philip IV leaves behind 3 healthy adult sons, Louis, Philip and Charles. The succession seems rock solid. The dynasty is safe. Yet, within the span of just 14 years, all 3 sons will die. Getty Images first is Louis VI, known as the Quarrelsome, who takes the throne in 1314. He reigns for a chaotic 18 months before dying suddenly after a game of tennis, drinking chilled wine while overheated, or so the story goes, though poison is the perennial suspect. He leaves a pregnant wife and a daughter. The son, born posthumously, is named John the Fasto. He lives for 5 days. King for a week, dead in the cradle. Next comes the second brother, Philip the Vasva, the Tall. He is capable, intelligent, and determined to restore order. He reigns for 6 years, stabilizes the currency, and then falls ill with dysentery and dies in 1322, leaving only daughters. Finally, the crown passes to the last brother, Charles IV, the Fair. He is the last hope. He reigns for 6 years. He dies in 1328. He leaves a daughter. In a heartbeat, the miracle of the Capetians is extinguished. The direct male line, unbroken for 3 centuries, is severed. The throne of France sits empty, sparking a succession crisis that will trigger the 100 Years' War between England and France, a conflict that will ravage the kingdom for generations. It is as if the destruction of the Templars broke a seal that held back the chaos. Historians, of course, argue that this is merely a regression to the mean. Genetic luck eventually runs out, and dysentery does not check for curses before it kills a king. But to the medieval mind, the connection was absolute. You do not burn a holy order and expect to keep your crown. The accursed kings, les rois maudits, became a legend that haunted the French monarchy for centuries. Even the mighty Louis XVI, facing the guillotine during the French Revolution nearly 500 years later, is said to have been imprisoned in the very tower of the temple where Jacques de Molay was held. Legend whispers that as the blade fell on the last king of France, a man in the crowd leapt onto the scaffold, dipped his hand in the royal blood and shouted, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." It is almost certainly a fiction, a dramatic flourish added by later romantics, but it speaks to the enduring power of the story. The curse is not about magic, it is about moral balance. It is the idea that tyranny has a price and that eventually the bill comes due. As the year 1314 closes, the landscape of Europe has changed fundamentally. The Pope is dead, the King is dead, the Templars are ashes. The great figures of the drama have all exited the stage, leaving behind a power vacuum that will suck the continent into war. But in the shadows, something else is happening. The Templars are gone, but the Templars are not gone. In the mountains of Portugal, the king refuses to dissolve the order. He simply changes their name to the Order of Christ and lets them keep their castles and their cross. In Spain, they are absorbed into the Order of Montesa, and in Scotland, where the Pope's writ runs weak due to the excommunication of Robert the Bruce, whispers persist of strange knights arriving in the mist, men with French accents and combat experience looking for a place to hide. The physical structure has been smashed, but the diaspora has begun. The destruction of the order has inadvertently released its members into the wild, where they will seed new myths, new mysteries, and new organizations. The Iron King thought he was crushing a beetle. Instead, he stepped on a pod of spores, scattering them to the wind. The curse has done its work on the past. Now, the legend begins its work on the future. The camera pans away from the smouldering pyre in Paris, drifting westward over the darkened countryside of France, following the winding roads until the smell of wood smoke is replaced by the sharp, brine-heavy scent of the Atlantic Ocean. We arrive at the port of La Rochelle. It is the night of October 12th, 1307, the eve of the Great Arrest. While King Philip's agents are sharpening their knives in the capital, the docks here are shrouded in a thick, wet fog. La Rochelle is the Templars' window to the world, their primary naval base on the Atlantic coast. It is a fortress of the sea, bristling with masts and rigging, but tonight there is an unusual, frantic energy on the wharves. If the arrest orders were the best-kept secret in medieval Europe, someone, it seems, whispered. History gives us a name, Jean de Chalon. He was a serving brother who later testified before the Pope's commission. He claimed that the night before the raids, he saw 3 heavy carts, covered in straw, leave the Paris temple under the cover of darkness. They were escorted by a small elite guard of knights led by Hugues de Chalon and Gérard de Villars, the preceptor of France. These carts did not head for the royal treasury, they headed for the coast. Jean testified that they carried the treasure of the order. But what was that treasure? Gold? Relics? Or perhaps something more valuable? The archives, the banking records, the true genealogy of the order? The carts rattled their way to the coast, where 18 Templar galleys were waiting at La Rochelle. This is one of the most maddening and delicious gaps in the historical record. We know for a fact that the Templars possessed a significant fleet. They were a naval power, ferrying thousands of pilgrims and tons of grain across the Mediterranean for decades. They knew the sea better than any king in Europe. Yet when Philip's men seized the ports on the morning of Friday the 13th, the fleet was gone. Not captured, not burned, just gone. The King of France, who had orchestrated the perfect raid, found himself staring at empty docks. He had caught the knights, but he had missed the ships. And in the medieval world, 18 war galleys do not simply vanish like smoke. Where did they go? The question has spawned 1,000 legends, each more seductive than the last. The most logical destination, and the one supported by the most evidence, is Portugal. The King of Portugal, Dinis, had refused to persecute the Templars. He was a savvy monarch who understood that the knights were useful for guarding his borders against the Moors. He didn't dissolve the order, he simply rebranded it. The Knights Templar became the Order of Christ. They kept their castles, their uniforms, and their ships. The only thing that changed was the name on the letterhead. It is highly probable that many French captains, seeing the writing on the wall, weighed anchor and sailed south to the safety of the Tagus River. This theory gains weight when we look at the future. 2 centuries later, when the Portuguese explorers like Vasco da Gama and Prince Henry the Navigator launched the Age of Discovery, their ships sailed under the red pate cross on white sails, the exact insignia of the Templars. It suggests a direct continuity of naval expertise, a passing of the torch from the Crusaders of the 12th century to the explorers of the 15th. But there is a wilder whisper, one that turns the ships north, not south. This theory suggests that a portion of the fleet, carrying the secret archives, or perhaps something even more esoteric, sailed for Scotland. Scotland in 1307 was a pariah state. Its king, Robert the Bruce, was excommunicated by the Pope for murdering his rival in a church. This meant that the papal bull dissolving the Templars held no legal weight there. Scotland was the only place in Christendom where the Pope's writ could be safely ignored. Legend says the ships navigated the treacherous Irish Sea and landed on the craggy western coast, unloading men and cargo into the waiting arms of the Bruce. We will explore the Scottish connection more deeply in the next section, but the naval aspect alone is fascinating. Did Templar navigators help the Scots? Did their knowledge of stars and tides find a new home in the mist? Shutterstock. And then there is the furthest horizon, the theory that pushes the prow of the Templar ships all the way across the Atlantic. This is the realm of pseudo-history, yet it persists with a stubborn resilience. The argument goes that the Templars, through their contact with Islamic scholars and their own travels, knew that the world was round and that lands lay to the west. Some stories claim the missing fleet followed the Star of La Mer to a land called L'America, a linguistic stretch, but a poetic one. Proponents point to the Westford Knight, a carving on a rock in Massachusetts that looks suspiciously like a medieval knight, or the Money Pit of Oak Island in Nova Scotia, rumoured to hold the lost Templar treasury. While serious historians dismiss these claims as fantasy, the silence of the record allows the fantasy to breathe. The ocean is vast, and dead men tell no tales. If a Templar ship did wreck on the shores of the New World a century before Columbus, the wood would have rotted long ago, leaving only the ghost of a possibility. What we do know is that Philip IV was furious. He sent out his own ships to hunt the fugitives, but they found nothing. The Atlantic is a big place, and the Templars were master mariners. They knew how to disappear. This naval escape adds a crucial layer to the myth, the idea of survival. If the fleet escaped, then the order didn't die. It merely moved. It transformed from a static, land-based power into a mobile maritime enigma. It suggests that the brain of the order, the archives, the maps, the core leadership who weren't foolish enough to be caught in Paris, survived the stroke. Imagine the scene on the deck of the flagship as it slips out of La Rochelle. The captain, a veteran of the Siege of Acre, looks back at the receding lights of France. He knows he can never return. He is a man without a country, a soldier without a war. Below decks, crates are lashed tight against the rolling swell, crates that perhaps hold the banking records that would incriminate half the nobility of Europe, or perhaps the reliquaries saved from the Temple Mount. The sails fill with the cold night wind. The red cross snaps in the gale. They are sailing into the unknown, leaving the history books and entering the fog of legend. This missing fleet is the bridge between the historical Templars and the mythical ones. It is the vehicle that carries the story from the facts of 1307 to the fantasies of the Da Vinci Code. It allows us to believe that they are still out there, somewhere, hiding in plain sight. It changes the narrative from a tragedy of extinction to a thriller of evasion. The fire on the Ile des Juifs burned the body of the order, but the fleet carried away its soul. And as the ships disappear over the horizon, we are left standing on the dock with King Philip, empty-handed, staring at the empty grey water, wondering what exactly slipped through his fingers. The wealth of the Templars was never just gold. It was information. And information, unlike men, is very hard to burn. The camera dissolves from the grey Atlantic waves to the rolling, mist-shrouded lowlands of Scotland. The air here is softer, wetter, smelling of heather and peat smoke. It is June 1314. just 3 months after the fires of Paris consumed Jacques de Molay. While France is haunted by curses, Scotland is bracing for war. King Robert the Bruce, a man as hard and unyielding as the granite of his homeland, faces a catastrophic threat. Edward II of England has marched north with a massive army, 25,000 men, to crush the Scottish rebellion once and for all. Bruce has barely 6,000 spears. By all conventional logic, the Battle of Bannockburn should be a massacre. The Scots are pinned against the Bannockburn, a muddy stream that winds through the marshland, but there is a whisper in the wind, a persistent legend that refuses to die, that Bruce is not fighting alone. The story goes that as the battle raged on the second day, when the Scots were exhausted and the English heavy cavalry was pressing hard, a fresh force suddenly appeared on the crest of Gillies Hill. To the English, they looked like a reserve army, disciplined, mounted, and charging with a fury that turned the tide of the battle. The English, thinking they were facing a fresh host, broke and fled. Standard history tells us these were the small folk, camp followers, cooks, and servants banging pots and pans to scare the enemy. But the Romantic tradition insists on a different identity. It asks, would a seasoned English army run from a few cooks with ladles? Or did they run because they saw the one thing they feared more than death, the white mantles and red crosses of the Knights Templar, ghosts rising from the grave to take vengeance on the crown that had betrayed them? Scholars debate this fiercely. There is no paper trail proving a Templar unit fought at Bannockburn, yet the logic of the landscape makes it plausible. Scotland was the only kingdom in Europe where the papal bull vox in excelso was not read aloud. Bruce was excommunicated. He didn't care what the Pope thought. If you were a fugitive knight in 1314, hunted by every king in Christendom, Scotland was the only safe harbour left. We know Templars owned land here. Ballintradock was their Scottish headquarters. It is not a leap to imagine that the refugees from La Rochelle found their way here, trading their swords for sanctuary. But the trail does not stop at Bannockburn. It goes underground, winding through the centuries until it resurfaces in a quiet glen just south of Edinburgh, at a place that has become the Holy of Holies for conspiracy theorists, Rosslyn Chapel, built in 1446 by William Sinclair, the Earl of Caithness. The chapel is an architectural riddle carved in stone. It was supposed to be a collegiate church, but it looks like a hallucination. The interior is suffocatingly ornate. Every inch of stone is covered in carvings, green men with vines growing out of their mouths, biblical scenes, dance of death figures, and strange geometric patterns. It is a library of symbols, but the key has been lost. The legend claims that the Sinclair family were the hereditary guardians of the Templar secrets. The theory posits that after the order was destroyed, the survivors morphed into a secret society, eventually birthing Freemasonry, with Rosslyn as their stone vault. Visitors today point to the apprentice pillar, a breathtakingly intricate column inside the chapel. The story, a grim bit of medieval workplace drama, tells of a master mason who went to Rome to study a design for the pillar. While he was gone, his apprentice had a dream of the finished column and carved it himself. When the master returned and saw the boy's genius work, he was so consumed by envy that he struck the apprentice dead with a mallet. It is a tragedy, yes, but to those with eyes for the esoteric, it echoes the Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff, the builder of Solomon's temple who was murdered for his secrets. Then there are the carvings that shouldn't be there. High in the arches there are depictions of plants that look suspiciously like maize, corn, and aloe vera. Both are American plants. Rosslyn was built 50 years before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Did the missing fleet of the Templars actually reach the New World, perhaps following Viking routes, and bring back seeds or sketches? It is a tantalizing thought that a medieval Scottish earl knew about America while the rest of Europe was still drawing dragons on the edge of the map. Botanists argue that the carvings are just stylized wheat or strawberries, but the resemblance is uncanny enough to keep the dream alive. The atmosphere inside Rosslyn is undeniably heavy. It does not feel like a standard Christian church. The floor plan is said to mimic the layout of Herod's temple in Jerusalem. Beneath the floor lies a crypt that has been sealed for centuries. The Sinclairs are buried there, not in coffins but in full armour, laid out like sleeping knights. Sir Walter Scott, the great romantic poet, wrote of the chapel proud, where Roslyn's chiefs uncoffined lie. Ground-penetrating radar has suggested the presence of a large vault, but the trustees of the chapel do not allow excavation, and so the mystery remains sealed in silence. Is the Holy Grail down there? The head of John the Baptist? The treasure of the Templars? Or just a lot of dust and the bones of some very well-dressed nobleman? This connection between the Templars and the Freemasons is the final great mutation of the legend. In the 18th century, as Freemasonry became popular in Europe, the idea took hold that the Masons were the spiritual or literal descendants of the Knights. It gave the Masons a glamorous lineage. They weren't just a guild of stonecutters, they were the heirs to the warrior monks. The Knights Templar became a high degree within the Masonic rite. It is a brilliant bit of branding. It allowed the Templar ideals, brotherhood, secrecy, charity, and vague mysticism, to survive long after the last sword was rusted. The beauty of the Scottish connection is not in the proof, which is scant, but in the feeling. It satisfies our need for justice. We hate the idea that the Templars were simply wiped out by a greedy king. We want them to have escaped. We want them to have outsmarted the system, to have fled into the mist and built a secret kingdom of wisdom. Rosslyn Chapel serves as the physical anchor for this desire. It stands there, half ruined, covered in moss, whispering that history is not just what is written in the books of the victors, it is what is hidden in the stone. As the sun sets over the Pentland Hills, casting the chapel into shadow, one can almost hear the phantom hoofbeats. The reality of the Templars, the dust, the blood, the banking receipts, has faded. In its place stands the myth. The white mantle has become a shroud of mystery. The sword has become a symbol of truth. The Templars have achieved the one thing every warrior desires, but few find: immortality. They did not find it in Jerusalem, and they did not find it in Paris. They found it here, in the stories we tell ourselves in the dark, in the belief that somewhere the watch is still being kept. The echoes in the Scottish mist are not just sounds, they are the heartbeat of a legend that refuses to surrender. The camera pulls back one last time, rising high above the mist of Scotland, the ashes of Paris, and the ruins of the Holy Land, until the entire map of Europe and the Mediterranean is laid out below us like a faded parchment. We have travelled through 2 centuries of iron and faith, from the dusty steps of Solomon's temple to the fiery stake on the Ile des Juifs. The physical order of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ in the Temple of Solomon is gone. The last Grand Master is dust. The fleet is lost. The gold is spent. By all rights, the story should have ended in 1749. History is full of orders that rose and fell, the Teutonic Knights, the Hospitallers, the Order of Calatrava, yet none of them haunt our collective dreams like the Templars. Why? Why does a defunct brotherhood of medieval monks still occupy the prime real estate of our imagination 700 years later? The answer lies in the nature of memory. The Templars did not die. They transcended. They ceased to be men and became an archetype. In the centuries following their destruction, they lay dormant, like seeds waiting for the right soil. Then, In the 18th and 19th centuries, the Romantics dug them up. Sir Walter Scott, in his novel Ivanhoe, painted them as complex brooding villains, proud, fierce, and tragically flawed. It was a character assassination, perhaps, but it made them cool. It gave them a dark charisma that the purely virtuous knights of King Arthur lacked. Suddenly, every secret society in Europe wanted a piece of the pedigree. Freemasons, occultists, and revolutionaries all claimed to be the hidden heirs of the temple. They looked at the Templars and saw whatever they wanted to see. To the anti-clericals, the Templars were victims of a corrupt pope, martyrs for free thought. To the traditionalists, they were the ultimate defenders of hierarchy and order. To the mystics, they were the guardians of the Holy Grail, possessors of a secret wisdom that could unlock the universe. This malleability is their true magic. The Templars have become the blank canvas of history. Because their archives were destroyed and their rituals were secret, we can project anything onto them. In our modern pop culture, they are everywhere. In video games, they are the puppet masters controlling human history from the shadows. In best-selling novels, they are the protectors of the bloodline of Christ. In movies, they are the grim guardians of treasure maps. We see their red cross on t-shirts, mugs, and conspiracy forums. They have achieved a level of brand recognition that Coca-Cola would envy, and they haven't spent a dime on marketing since the 12th century. But beyond the conspiracy theories and the blockbuster thrillers, there is a deeper, more melancholic resonance to their story. The Templars represent the loss of certainty. They belonged to an age where men believed that they could serve God with a sword, where the world was black and white, and where a single vow could define a life. We, living in a fractured, complex grey world, look back at them with a strange kind of envy. We envy their clarity. We are drawn to the image of the warrior monk, the man who has mastered both the inner world of the spirit and the outer world of violence. It is a dangerous ideal, yes, but a seductive one. It speaks to the part of us that wants to believe that there is a right thing to do, and that if we just had the courage to put on the white mantle, we could do it. Historians still argue about the real Templars versus the mythical ones. The real Templars were not magicians or heretics. They were tired, dusty men who managed estates, fought dysentery, and worried about the price of oats. They were not guarding the Holy Grail. They were guarding the road to Jericho. But in a way, the historians are missing the point. The idea of the Templar is more powerful than the fact of the Templar. The fact is a tragedy of politics and greed. The idea is a triumph of the human spirit. It is the story of 9 men who stood in the ruins of the past and decided to build a future. It is the story of a brotherhood that stood shoulder to shoulder against the impossible odds of Hatton and Acre. It is the story of dignity in the face of torture, and of a final, defiant scream from the flames that terrified a king. Today, if you visit the Temple Church in London, you can see the stone effigies of the knights lying on the floor. They are worn smooth by time and the touch of a million tourists. Their faces are blank, their eyes closed in eternal sleep. The noise of the modern city, the buses, the phones, the sirens, fades away when you step inside the round nave. You are standing in a space built by men who believed they were the architects of God's kingdom on earth. The stone remembers them. The geometry of the arches remembers them. And we remember them. Their legacy is not in a hidden vault of gold in Nova Scotia or a secret bloodline in France. Their legacy is in the lesson of their rise and fall. They taught us that faith can move mountains, but that power always comes with a price. They showed us that you can build the strongest fortresses in the world, but if you lose your purpose, the walls will not save you. They are a warning and an inspiration, a mirror held up to our own ambitions and fears. As we reach the end of this long journey, the timeline dissolves. We are no longer in 1119 or 1291 or 1314. We are here in the quiet of the present moment. The Knights Templar have ridden off the edge of the world, vanishing into the mist of legend. They have laid down their swords. They have taken off their heavy armour. The long war is over. The roads to Jerusalem are silent. The bells of Acre are still. The fire of Paris is cold. All that remains is the story, a story of courage, betrayal, and mystery that has been whispered like a lullaby to the centuries. The temple is no longer a building of stone. It is a temple of memory, built in the mind of every person who has ever looked at a ruined castle and wondered, who walked here before me? The white mantle has been folded away. The red cross has faded into the twilight. The ghosts are at rest. And so we leave them there, in the shadows of history, standing guard over secrets that perhaps never existed, protecting a dream that will never die. They are the eternal sentinels of the night, watching over the border between what was and what might have been. And now their watch is ended, and yours, dear listener, is just beginning. Not a watch of war, but a watch of dreams. Now, let the heavy curtain of history fall gently back into place. The dates, the names, the battles, let them all drift away like smoke on a breeze. You don't need to carry them anymore. They are written in the books, safe and sound, and they will still be there when you wake. For now, your only task is to let go. Imagine you are standing in the quiet courtyard of an ancient, peaceful place. The sun has set long ago, and the air is cool and still, smelling of lavender and old stone. Above you, the stars are beginning to emerge, one by one. The same stars that look down on the nights in the desert, the same stars that watch over you now. They are steady, calm, and indifferent to the passing of time. Feel the weight of your own body sinking into the softness of your bed. It is a good weight. It is the feeling of safety. You are not on a hard saddle. You are not on a cold stone floor. You are here, in this moment of warmth and comfort. Every muscle in your legs, your back, your shoulders, let them uncoil. Let the tension melt away like wax near a flame. The noise of the world outside is fading, retreating into a distant hum that cannot touch you. You are in your own inner fortress, a sanctuary where no demands can enter. The gates are barred, the bridge is up. You are protected by the silence. Breathe in slowly, filling your chest with the velvet dark of the night. Breathe out, releasing the day, releasing the story, releasing the need to know anything at all. The river of time flows on, slow and deep, carrying you gently toward the shores of sleep. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to solve, just the soft rhythmic rise and fall of your own breath, a quiet prayer of rest. Drift now. Float on the surface of the silence, deeper and deeper into the calm. The white knights are sleeping. The kings are sleeping. The world is turning slowly in the dark. Sweet dreams.